Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1. When I moved into the duplex, I asked for every document available, permits, electrical layout, original floor plans. I'm cautious like that. I cross-referenced everything down to the nail. So when I stepped on a loose floorboard under the pantry and it shifted downward, I froze. There was no mention of a crawl space, let alone a full trapdoor. I pried it open and found a narrow wooden staircase. The air below was cold, stale, and thick. What I found down there wasn't just unsettling, it was deliberate. Chains, plastic sheeting, a camera bolted to the ceiling. On the back wall, scratched into the cement, were rows of tally marks, and a single message carved into the wood: "Do not close it again." I haven't touched the door since, but every morning it's ajar. The rental agent had seemed eager to close the deal. Too eager, maybe. She'd mentioned the previous tenant had left suddenly, something about a family emergency. The landlord was overseas, she said, and just wanted reliable renters. I remember how she kept glancing at her phone, how she rushed through the final walkthrough. Her perfume was overpowering, vanilla and something metallic underneath. I started with the obvious questions. The neighbor to the left, an elderly woman who tended her garden obsessively, claimed she'd never seen the previous tenant, not once. Strange, considering the walls were thin enough that I could hear her television most evenings. The mailman remembered delivering packages regularly, always to the same name, but couldn't recall what the person looked like. Even stranger, the packages were always collected within minutes of delivery. The basement room measured exactly 8 feet by 12 feet. I paced it off multiple times. The chains were bolted into the concrete, positioned at odd intervals, not random, but following some logic I couldn't decipher. The plastic sheeting was industrial grade, the kind used in construction, but it had been installed with care, overlapping seams sealed with professional precision. Someone had spent considerable time down there. The camera troubled me most. It was professional equipment, not some cheap security device. The mounting bracket was custom-made, positioned to capture the entire room from above. When I examined it closely, I found a small memory card still inside. My hands shook as I removed it. The metallic taste in my mouth grew stronger with each passing moment. I took the card to a computer repair shop across town. The technician was young, covered in tattoos, the kind of person who asked few questions. He plugged it into his machine and his expression shifted immediately. He ejected the card and handed it back to me without a word. When I pressed him, he just shook his head and said some things were better left alone. His fingers trembled slightly as he spoke. That evening I called the rental agency. The woman who answered wasn't the same person who'd shown me the property. This voice was older, more businesslike. When I mentioned the agent's name, there was a long pause. She told me no one by that name had worked there for over 2 years. The description I provided didn't match any current employees. She seemed genuinely confused about who had processed my rental agreement. Sleep became difficult. I found myself listening for sounds from below, imagining footsteps on those wooden stairs. The trapdoor remained slightly open each morning, despite my certainty that I'd left it closed. I started placing objects against it, books, a small table, anything with weight. They'd be moved aside by dawn, arranged neatly to one side as if someone had carefully cleared the path. The tally marks haunted my thoughts. I'd counted them obsessively, 437. Each one carved with deliberate precision, none overlapping, arranged in perfect rows. They represented something: days, events, victims. The wood around them was worn smooth, as if someone had traced them repeatedly with their fingers. I researched the property's history at the local records office. The building had changed hands frequently over the past decade. Each sale happened quickly, usually within months of the previous transaction. The prices varied wildly, sometimes well below market value, other times significantly higher. There was no logical pattern, except that every seller seemed desperate to finalize the deal. One name appeared multiple times in the paperwork, a witness to several transactions, always present at closings. I found an address and decided to visit. The house was modest, well maintained, with newspapers piled on the porch. When I knocked, a woman answered through the chain-locked door. She was middle-aged, nervous, with eyes that wouldn't meet mine directly. When I mentioned the duplex, her demeanor changed completely. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her, and spoke in whispers. She'd been required to witness those closings, she said, but had never understood why the same property kept selling. The buyers were always different, but they shared something, a desperate quality, as if they were running from something. She remembered the smell of vanilla perfume at every closing. The woman told me about the previous tenant, the one who'd supposedly left for a family emergency. She'd seen him once, briefly, loading boxes into a van during the middle of the night, but the person she described didn't match the rental application I'd found in my mailbox. Different height, different build, different age entirely. When I showed her the application, she shook her head firmly. That wasn't the person she'd seen. I returned home with more questions than answers. The basement called to me constantly now, a gravitational pull I couldn't ignore. I'd find myself standing at the edge of the trapdoor, staring down into the darkness, trying to understand what had happened in that room. The smell of vanilla had begun to permeate my apartment, growing stronger each day. The memory card sat on my kitchen table, untouched since the computer technician's reaction. Part of me knew I should dispose of it, pretend I'd never found it, but the other part, the part that needed answers, kept me paralyzed with indecision. What if it contained evidence of something terrible? What if someone needed justice? What if I was the only person who could provide it? The scratched message haunted me most of all. Do not close it again. Was it a warning, a threat, a plea from someone who'd been trapped in that room? The wood around the letters was dark, stained with something that might have been blood or might have been water damage. I couldn't tell which possibility disturbed me more. I started noticing things about my neighbors I'd missed before. The way they avoided eye contact when we passed on the street, how conversations stopped when I approached. The elderly woman next door had installed new locks on her doors and windows. When I asked about it, she claimed there'd been break-ins in the area, but the police had no record of any reports. The truth began to crystallize slowly, like ice forming on a window. The rental agent who didn't exist, the tenant who'd never been seen, the basement room that wasn't on any blueprints, the memory card that contained something so disturbing a professional couldn't look at it twice, the tally marks that represented 437 of something. I realized I wasn't the first person to discover that room. The previous tenant had found it too, and the one before that. Each person who'd rented the duplex had eventually uncovered the basement, had been faced with the same evidence, the same questions, the same impossible decisions. Some had fled immediately. Others had stayed longer trying to understand. But all of them had eventually left, and the property had been rented again to someone new. The pattern was deliberate. Someone was using the duplex as a trap, counting on human curiosity to draw people into discovering the room. But why? What was the purpose? Was it about silencing witnesses, or was there something more complex at work? I considered going to the police, but with what evidence? A room that wasn't supposed to exist, a memory card I was afraid to examine, the testimony of neighbors who claimed to know nothing, the word of a witness who spoke only in whispers. They'd think I was delusional, or worse, that I was involved in whatever had happened down there. The vanilla smell grew stronger each day, mixing with the metallic taste that never left my mouth. I found myself checking the locks obsessively, starting at every sound. The trapdoor remained ajar each morning, no matter what I did to secure it. Sometimes I caught myself standing over it, listening to the silence below, wondering if someone was down there right now, waiting. The 437 tally marks seemed to pulse in my memory, each one representing a choice someone had made: stay and investigate, or run and remain ignorant. Each mark was a day someone had struggled with the same decision I faced now. Each mark was a day someone had lived with the knowledge of what that room contained. I understood now why the previous tenants had left so suddenly. The basement wasn't just evidence of past crimes, it was an active threat, a question that demanded an answer. Close the door and pretend nothing happened, or open it wider and face whatever truth lay beneath. But the message carved into the wood suggested there was no real choice at all. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The memory card still sits on my table, its secrets intact. The trapdoor still opens itself each morning, revealing the darkness below. And I still haven't decided whether I'm brave enough to plug that card into my computer, or smart enough to pack my belongings and disappear like all the others before me. But I'm beginning to understand that perhaps the choice was never mine to make. Perhaps I'm just the next person in a long line of people who have stumbled into this trap, the next person whose name will appear on a rental agreement that doesn't quite match their description. The next person who will leave suddenly, creating space for someone new to move in and start the cycle again. The vanilla perfume is stronger this morning, and for the first time since I found the room, the trapdoor is completely closed. Crime 2, I just let him in from the backyard, same routine as always. But this time he dropped something at my feet. It wasn't a stick, it wasn't a bone, it was a molar, old, cracked, and unmistakably human. I thought maybe he'd dug into something. I went out, checked the flower beds. He'd clawed a deep hole behind the shed. At the bottom, buried under plastic and dirt, was a shoe, still tied, still on something. I covered it back up and didn't call anyone. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it was a mistake, but now, every time I look at my dog, he just stares back, wagging his tail like he's waiting for me to finish what he started. The rational part of my mind kept telling me to report it, call the authorities, let someone else handle whatever was buried in my backyard, but something held me back. The previous owner had lived here for decades before selling to me, an elderly woman who kept to herself, according to the neighbors. Sweet lady, they said, always walking her little terrier around the block, always waving hello. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. The way the soil in that corner looked different from the rest of the yard, darker, richer, like it had been disturbed and refilled. The shed itself seemed oddly positioned, angled to block the view from neighboring windows. Small details that meant nothing individually but felt significant when considered together. My dog developed a routine of sitting by the back door, staring toward that corner of the yard. His behavior changed subtly, less playful, more watchful. Sometimes I'd catch him digging in other spots, as if searching for something else. Each time I'd fill the holes back in and tell myself it was normal dog behavior. I decided to research the previous owner. Public records showed she'd lived alone for the last 15 years of her life. Before that, there had been a husband. He disappeared one day, according to an old missing person report I found buried in newspaper archives. No body ever found. Case went cold. She continued living in the house, tending her garden, walking her dog. The neighbors remembered him vaguely. A quiet man who worked odd jobs. They'd had arguments, voices carrying across the yards on summer evenings. Then one day the arguments stopped. She told people he'd left her for someone else, packed up and moved away without a word. Believable enough. These things happen. I started walking around the neighborhood, striking up conversations. The elderly couple next door remembered the missing man differently than the others. They described him as devoted to his wife, someone who wouldn't abandon his responsibilities. They'd found it strange when he supposedly left without settling his debts or collecting his tools from various job sites. The more I learned, the less sense the official story made, but the alternative explanation felt impossible to accept. This was suburban normalcy, garden parties and recycling bins and friendly waves across driveways, not the setting for something darker. My dog brought me other things, a button, a piece of fabric, a small metal object that might have been part of a watch band. Each discovery felt like evidence, but evidence of what exactly remained unclear. I collected these items in a box, unsure what else to do with them. I found myself measuring the backyard differently, calculating spaces, estimating volumes. The area behind the shed could accommodate more than one burial site. The thought arrived unbidden and refused to leave. How many people go missing and are never found? How many cold cases remain unsolved because the truth is buried in someone's backyard? The previous owner had died in her sleep, according to the real estate agent. Natural causes, old age, a peaceful end to a long life. But now I wondered what secrets she'd taken with her, what conversations she'd had with herself during those final years, looking out at her carefully maintained garden. I began having dreams about digging. In the dreams, I was always searching for something specific, though I never knew what. The soil was always wrong, too soft in some places, too hard in others. I'd wake up with dirt under my fingernails, though I hadn't touched the garden in days. The rational thing would be to call someone, report the finding, let professionals handle the excavation and investigation. But I found myself protecting something I couldn't name. Maybe the memory of a woman who'd seemed kind to her neighbors. Maybe my own need to believe that ordinary places remained ordinary. My dog watches me through the kitchen window when I stand at the sink. His gaze moves between me and that corner of the yard, patient and expectant. Sometimes I think he understands something I'm still learning to accept. That beneath the surface of normal life, other stories are waiting to be uncovered. The tooth sits in my desk drawer now, wrapped in tissue paper. Physical proof of something I'm not ready to acknowledge. Every day I tell myself that tomorrow I'll make the call, but tomorrow keeps becoming today, and I keep finding reasons to wait. Late at night, when the house settles and creaks, I wonder if some truths are better left buried, if some discoveries change too much about how we see the world and our place in it. My dog seems to think otherwise. He's still digging, still bringing me pieces of someone else's story. And I'm still deciding whether I'm brave enough to see where it leads. Crime 3, the apartment wasn't great, but I needed cheap. One closet door wouldn't open, so I assumed it was sealed from years of humidity or painted over. I didn't bother with it until I noticed something odd. The nail heads were on the inside of the frame. I peeled away the wood and pried it open. Dust choked the air. Inside, everything was child-sized. A mattress, tiny drawings on the wall, scratch marks near the floor. Someone had been living in there, or hiding. Taped behind the door was a single Polaroid, a photo of someone peeking out from inside this same closet, wearing my clothes. The photo trembled in my fingers. The face was obscured by shadows, but the shirt was unmistakable. The same blue flannel I'd worn to work yesterday. The same tear near the left pocket from catching it on a fence. My skin crawled as I studied the image, searching for any detail that might explain this impossibility. I called the landlord. His voice carried an edge when I mentioned the closet. "You opened it. I told the previous tenant to leave it alone." Previous tenant. A pause stretched between us, filled only by static. Strange kid, never caused trouble, paid rent early, just disappeared one day, left all their stuff. I pressed him for details, but he claimed ignorance. Said he'd never been inside the apartment during the previous lease, never saw the closet's contents. His answers felt rehearsed, like lines he'd practiced. That evening I examined the drawings on the closet walls, crude stick figures in crayon but disturbing in their repetition. The same scene over and over, a small figure hiding while larger shadows moved outside. At the bottom of one wall, words scratched into the paint with something sharp. They think I left. The mattress smelled of unwashed sheets and something else, fear, perhaps. How does fear smell? Sour and metallic, like old coins left in sweaty palms. I found more photos tucked between the mattress and wall. Different angles of the apartment taken from hidden vantage points. Under furniture, behind curtains, through crack in doors. Someone had been watching, documenting. The final photo stopped my breath. It showed me sleeping in my own bed, taken just 2 nights ago. The angle suggested it was shot from inside the closet, but that was impossible. The closet had been sealed when I moved in. I questioned my neighbors. The elderly woman next door remembered the previous tenant vaguely, a quiet young person who kept odd schedules. She'd sometimes hear movement during the day when most people were at work. Skittish thing, she said, wrapping her shawl tighter. Always looked over their shoulder like someone was following. Asked me once if I'd noticed anyone watching the building. The man across the hall had a different perspective. He claimed the previous tenant was paranoid, constantly reporting break-ins that police never substantiated. Security footage from those incidents had been mysteriously corrupted or missing. I visited the local police station. The desk sergeant pulled up incident reports tied to my address. Multiple calls about suspected intruders, strange noises, feelings of being watched, all filed by someone matching the description of my predecessor. All investigations inconclusive. Mental health issues, the sergeant suggested with a shrug, happens more than you'd think. People get fixated on imaginary threats. But the photos weren't imaginary. The scratches on the closet walls weren't delusions. Someone had been genuinely afraid, genuinely hiding. I returned to the apartment and searched more thoroughly. Behind the refrigerator, I found a journal wrapped in plastic. The handwriting was small, cramped, urgent. Entries described feeling watched constantly, finding evidence that someone had been in the apartment while they were out. Food moved, belongings shifted, the smell of unfamiliar cologne lingering in rooms. The final entries grew increasingly frantic. The writer believed someone had a key, was coming and going freely. They'd started sleeping in the closet, feeling safer in the confined space. The last entry was barely legible. They're inside. They've always been inside. I checked my own belongings more carefully. Subtle signs suggested disturbance, books not quite where I'd left them, kitchen items in slightly wrong positions. My laptop showed login attempts from times when I'd been at work. The security deposit I'd paid was unusually low for an apartment in this condition. The landlord's phone went straight to voicemail when I called again. I drove to the address listed on my lease documents, but found only an empty lot. The property management company existed, but their offices had been closed for months, according to surrounding businesses. I realized I'd never actually met my landlord in person. All communications had been through text messages and email. The key had been left in a lockbox, the lease signed electronically. No face-to-face contact, no verification of identity. Standing in my apartment, was it really mine? I felt the same sensation the previous tenant had described. The feeling of being observed, of not being alone. The closet door hung open now, its dark interior seeming to pulse with possibility. I examined the Polaroid again, the one showing someone wearing my clothes. The image quality was poor, but something nagged at me. The person's posture, the way they held their shoulders, familiar somehow. I held the photo up to a mirror, comparing it to my own reflection. The height seemed right, the build similar, but the face remained shadowed, unidentifiable. That night I lay awake listening. The building settled around me with creaks and sighs, but underneath those normal sounds I heard something else. Breathing that didn't match my own rhythm, movement in spaces where no one should be. I rose quietly and searched the apartment again, but found nothing. No hiding places I hadn't already discovered, no evidence of intrusion, yet the feeling persisted. I was not alone. The truth began forming in my mind like a developing photograph, clarity emerging slowly from chemical darkness. What if the previous tenant hadn't left? What if they'd simply gotten better at hiding? What if everything I'd found was meant to be found? A trail of breadcrumbs leading me to a conclusion someone wanted me to reach. Or perhaps the question wasn't who had been hiding in the closet, but who was hiding now. The photos of me sleeping, the subtle disturbances in my belongings, the impossible logistics of my lease arrangement. Signs pointing to a presence that had learned to move unseen, to exist in the spaces between awareness and reality. I picked up the Polaroid one final time, studying the shadowed figure in clothes that matched my own. The person peeking out from the closet that had been nailed shut from the inside. A hiding place that could only be sealed by someone who intended to stay hidden. The image stared back at me, and I began to understand that some questions were more dangerous than their answers. Some closets were meant to stay closed, some truths buried in darkness where they belonged. But it was too late for that realization. The door was open now, and whatever had been hidden was free to continue its work in the spaces I couldn't see, wearing faces I couldn't recognize, living in the gaps between what I knew and what I feared to discover. Crime 4, I bought it from a pawn shop, still in its case. The label said untested, but I was curious. I hit play, expecting someone else's old conversations. What came out was me, my voice, my accent, but saying things I've never said out loud. Things I'd only thought, regrets I've never told anyone, private fantasies, dark ones I never recorded myself. I never even owned that model before, but the tape was full of my mind, word for word. And near the end, it said something I hadn't thought yet, something violent, something I ended up doing that same night. The recorder sat on my kitchen table for days after that first listen. Black plastic, worn edges, a small crack in the display. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone who sounded exactly like me. Maybe a coincidence so unlikely it defied logic, but deep down I knew better. I started carrying it everywhere, in my jacket pocket against my ribs where I could feel its weight. The detective assigned to the case kept asking about my whereabouts, my relationships, my mental state. Standard questions, she said, but her eyes lingered on my face longer than they should have. I wanted to show her the recorder, to explain that I wasn't crazy, that something impossible had happened. Instead, I nodded and answered her questions with the same voice that had somehow ended up on that tape. The victim's apartment had been pristine except for one room. The bedroom, furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, personal items scattered across the floor, but nothing was missing, nothing valuable anyway. The detective mentioned this detail during our second interview, watching my reaction. She said it looked like someone had been searching for something specific, something small. I remembered the weight of the recorder in my pocket during that conversation, how my fingers had found its edges, traced the buttons I'd memorized by touch. The detective noticed my hand movements, made a note in her file. I wondered if she could hear the slight tremor in my voice when I told her I'd been home alone that evening. Alone with my thoughts, alone with a device that somehow knew them better than I did. The recordings didn't stop with that first tape. New ones appeared every few days, always in places I'd visited. My voice clear and unmistakable, discussing plans I'd never made, describing places I'd never been, mentioning people I'd never met. But the strangest part wasn't the impossibility of it all. It was how right everything sounded, how natural. Like I was finally hearing my true thoughts, the ones I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten they existed. The victim had been a collector. The detective mentioned this during our third meeting held at the coffee shop where I'd found another tape tucked behind the sugar dispenser. Old electronics, she said. Radios, record players, voice recorders. The killer had gone through everything, opened every device, checked every tape and disc, looking for something. The detective stirred her coffee slowly, never taking her eyes off me. She asked if I knew anything about electronics. If I'd ever bought anything from pawn shops. I told her I preferred new things, clean things, items without history. She wrote that down too. The last recording I found was different from the others. My voice was quieter, more careful. It described the victim's neighborhood, the layout of the building, the sound of footsteps on old wooden floors, details I couldn't have known unless I'd been there. Unless I'd climbed those stairs, turned that corner, stood outside that door with something sharp in my hand and murder in my heart. But I remembered being home that evening. I remembered the taste of leftover pizza, the sound of rain against my windows, the weight of exhaustion pulling me towards sleep. I remembered everything except the thoughts that had somehow made their way onto that tape. The thoughts that had guided someone's hands, someone's footsteps, someone's weapon toward a stranger who collected broken things and tried to make them work again. The detective called yesterday. She said they'd made an arrest, someone with a history of violence, a connection to the victim, physical evidence that couldn't be explained away. The case was closed, justice served. The voice on the recordings became irrelevant, just another dead end in an investigation full of them. I should feel relieved, vindicated, free to move forward without the weight of suspicion pressing against my chest like that recorder in my pocket. Instead, I keep listening to those tapes, studying the cadence of my own voice describing things I swear I never thought, never planned, never did. The recorder still works perfectly. Sometimes I catch myself speaking into it, testing whether it might capture something new, some fresh confession or buried truth, but it stays silent now, waiting. The digital display shows zeros across the board, no trace of the impossible recordings that led me here. I've started visiting the victim's old neighborhood, walking the same streets, breathing the same air, trying to understand what drew me there. What drew my voice there, if not my body? The building where she died has new tenants now. Fresh locks, painted walls, no trace of what happened in that scattered bedroom. But sometimes, late at night, I hear something that makes me stop and listen. A sound that might be footsteps on old wooden floors. A whisper that might be my own voice, planning something I haven't thought of yet. Something I might do tomorrow, or next week, or the next time I find a recorder that knows me better than I know myself. The detective was right about one thing. The killer was looking for something specific, something small and easily hidden, something that could fit in your pocket and weigh on your conscience until you couldn't tell the difference between your thoughts and someone else's crimes. I still have the recorder. I tell myself I'm keeping it as evidence, as proof of something unexplainable. But really, I'm waiting to see what it might tell me next. What part of my mind might spill onto magnetic tape while I'm sleeping or walking or standing outside someone's door with empty hands and a head full of borrowed thoughts. The case might be closed, but the recordings continue. My voice, clear and unmistakable, describing futures I hope I'll never live and crimes I pray I'll never commit, unless I already have and just haven't remembered yet. Crime 5, it started with footsteps, heavy, dragging, always circling the same path. I figured it was a neighbor until I asked the landlord. He gave me a weird look, said no one had rented the upstairs unit in years. I pushed back. He got defensive. I recorded the sounds, the walking, the knocking, then the dragging, played it for him. He went pale and told me to delete it. I didn't. That night, I found muddy footprints on the ceiling above my bed. The apartment building felt different after that conversation. I'd been living there for 3 months, gotten used to the routine sounds of daily life filtering through thin walls. But these weren't routine sounds. They came at irregular intervals, sometimes lasting hours, sometimes just a few minutes of heavy movement that made my light fixtures sway. I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. The building directory downstairs only listed 4 units, but I could count 5 sets of windows from the street. The mailboxes were numbered inconsistently. My unit was 2B, but there was no 2A listed anywhere. When I mentioned this to other tenants, they changed the subject quickly, their eyes darting toward the stairwell that led to the upper floors. The landlord's reaction haunted me. I'd seen him handle difficult tenants before, watched him navigate complaints with practiced ease. But when I played that recording, something shifted in his demeanor. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone, and I caught him deleting something from his contacts list while he thought I wasn't looking. I decided to investigate on my own. The building's layout didn't make sense when you really studied it. The hallway on my floor extended further than it should, given the apartment configurations. There was a door at the end, painted the same color as the walls, easy to miss unless you were specifically looking for it. No number, no nameplate, but the lock looked recently changed. Late one evening, I climbed to the 3rd floor. The sounds had been particularly loud that day, and I needed to understand what was happening above my bedroom. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I approached what should have been the source of the noise. But the hallway was empty, the air thick with a smell I couldn't identify. Something between cleaning supplies and something organic, something that reminded me of my grandmother's basement after the flooding. I pressed my ear against the unmarked door. Silence, but then faintly I heard what sounded like a television playing. The volume was low, but I could make out the cadence of a news broadcast. Someone was definitely living up there. The landlord had lied to me, but why? The next morning I confronted him again. This time I was prepared. I documented everything, the inconsistent numbering, the extra set of windows, the sounds at various times. I'd even taken photos of the door upstairs. When I showed him the evidence, his face went through a series of expressions I'd never seen before. Fear, anger, and something that looked almost like guilt. He asked me to sit down in his office. The walls were covered with property management certificates and photos of various buildings he owned. But I noticed one photo was turned face down on his desk. When he stepped out to get coffee, I flipped it over. It showed this building, but with different tenants standing in front, a family with 2 young children, smiling and holding keys. The date on the back was from 2 years ago. When he returned, I asked about the photo. He stared at it for a long moment, then told me about the previous tenants in the upstairs unit, a family that had lived there for 6 months before leaving suddenly. They'd broken their lease, left most of their belongings behind. He'd cleaned out the unit himself, but he admitted something strange had happened during that process. He'd found things that didn't belong to the family, personal items that seemed much older, documents with names he didn't recognize, photographs of people he'd never seen before. There was also evidence that someone had been living in parts of the building that weren't supposed to be accessible. Makeshift sleeping areas in the basement, food stored in hidden compartments throughout the building. The family had complained about sounds too, he said. Not just footsteps, but voices, conversations happening in empty rooms. They'd reported feeling watched, finding their personal belongings moved or missing. The final straw came when they discovered someone had been entering their apartment while they were away. Nothing was stolen, but items were rearranged, and there were signs that someone had been using their shower and eating their food. After they left, he'd changed all the locks and decided not to rent the unit again, but the sounds continued. He'd hired security guards to patrol the building, but they reported nothing unusual. The sounds only seemed to occur when regular tenants were present. It was as if someone was deliberately trying to unsettle the people who lived there. I asked him why he hadn't told me this before. He said he'd hoped the activity would stop, that maybe the presence was tied to the previous family somehow, but my recordings proved that wasn't the case. Someone or something was still there, still active, still making their presence known to anyone who paid attention. That evening, I decided to confront the situation directly. I waited until I heard the footsteps begin, then grabbed my keys and headed upstairs. The sounds were louder than ever, accompanied by what sounded like furniture being moved around. I stood outside the unmarked door and knocked. The sound stopped immediately, complete silence. Then, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I heard footsteps approaching the door from the inside. They stopped right at the threshold. I could sense someone standing just inches away from me, separated only by the door. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. The apartment was furnished, lived in, but everything was covered in dust as if no one had been there for months. Yet the sounds had been coming from this exact location. I walked through each room, looking for signs of recent habitation. In the bedroom, I found something that made my blood run cold. On the nightstand was a notebook, open to a page filled with observations about the building's tenants. My name was there, along with detailed notes about my daily routine, my work schedule, even descriptions of conversations I'd had on phone calls. The handwriting was shaky, erratic, but the information was disturbingly accurate. The final entry was dated that morning. It simply said, "They're getting suspicious. Time to move again." I left the apartment immediately and called the landlord. When he arrived with a police officer, we searched the unit together. It was empty. No furniture, no personal belongings, no notebook. The rooms were bare except for some old paint cans and cleaning supplies. The officer took my statement but seemed skeptical about the whole situation. The landlord was as confused as I was. He had no explanation for what I'd seen or how the apartment could have been furnished just hours earlier. He showed the officer the keys to the unit, all accounted for, all the locks unchanged since the previous tenants had left. But I knew what I'd experienced. Someone had been living in that apartment, watching the building's residents, documenting our lives. The question wasn't whether it had happened, but where they'd gone and whether they were planning to return. The sounds stopped after that night. The building felt normal again, or as normal as it could feel knowing what I now knew. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed, I think about that notebook and wonder if someone is still watching, still taking notes, just from a different location. The landlord offered to let me break my lease without penalty. I considered it seriously, but something kept me there. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I felt responsible for uncovering whatever had been happening in that building. I installed additional locks on my door and security cameras in my apartment. I documented everything, kept detailed records of any unusual activity. Months passed without incident. I began to think maybe the presence had moved on, found a new building to haunt. But then I started noticing things about my neighbors, little inconsistencies in their stories, changes in their routines that didn't make sense. One of them mentioned hearing footsteps above their apartment, even though nothing was supposed to be up there. I realized that whoever had been living in the building might not have left at all. They might have just found a better hiding place, a more sophisticated way to observe without being detected. The building was old, full of spaces that weren't on any official floor plan. Someone determined enough could probably live there indefinitely, moving between abandoned areas, surviving on the periphery of our normal lives. The most disturbing thought was that they might not be alone. The building could be home to an entire network of people who existed in the spaces between legitimate residences, watching and documenting the lives of unsuspecting tenants. The landlord's reaction suggested he knew more than he'd initially admitted, but whether he was complicit or just overwhelmed by a situation beyond his control remained unclear. I still live in that apartment. I still hear sounds sometimes, though I can never pinpoint their source. I've learned to live with the uncertainty, the knowledge that my privacy might be an illusion, but I've also learned to pay attention, to notice the details that most people ignore. Because in a world where someone can live in the spaces we don't think to look, the only protection is awareness. And sometimes, even that isn't enough. Crime 6, it was just an old bed and breakfast, tucked away and rundown. I signed the guest book at the front desk without thinking, then flipped back through the pages. I stopped when I saw my own handwriting. Same signature, same style, dated months before I ever visited. The comment read, "Don't stay in the last room, it remembers." I asked for a different room. They said I had already booked the last one prepaid. When I got there, the window wouldn't open, the door locked from the outside. And there was a mirror cracked down the middle, with words etched into the glass. "Why didn't you listen to yourself?" The proprietor claimed ignorance when I confronted her. She was a woman whose face held too many lines for her apparent age, fingers permanently stained with ink from the old ledger books she preferred over computers. Her eyes darted away when I showed her the guest book entry, my handwriting staring back at us both like an accusation. "People forget they've been here before," she said, voice carrying a tremor that betrayed her casual words. "Happens more than you'd think." But I knew my own mind. I had never been to this place before. The drive through winding back roads had been unfamiliar, each turn revealing landscape I'd never seen. Yet there it was, clear as fresh ink, my signature beside that chilling warning. I returned to the room, studying every detail with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent years working insurance fraud cases. The carpet bore stains that housekeeping couldn't quite erase. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, revealing glimpses of older patterns beneath. The bed creaked with each movement, springs protesting decades of use. The mirror dominated one wall, its crack running from top to bottom like a jagged scar. The etching was crude but deliberate, each letter carved with something sharp enough to bite into glass. The words seemed to shift in the lamplight, becoming clearer as darkness settled outside. I photographed everything, documenting angles and details the way I'd learned to do when something didn't add up. The room had a musty smell, like old books left too long in damp places, but underneath lay something else, something metallic and sharp that made my throat tighten. Sleep came in fragments. I doze off only to wake with the sensation that someone had been watching me. The mirror caught every movement, splitting my reflection into two distorted halves. In the fractured glass, I looked like a stranger to myself. The next morning brought no relief. I found the proprietor in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for guests who never seemed to materialize. She moved with the mechanical precision of routine, cracking eggs into a pan while humming a tune I couldn't identify. "That room has history," she said without turning around. "People come looking for answers. Sometimes they find more than they bargained for." I pressed her for details, but she deflected each question with practiced ease. The previous owner had died under mysterious circumstances. There had been an investigation that went nowhere. Guests reported strange experiences, but nothing that couldn't be explained away by old buildings settling or overactive imaginations. "What about the guest book entry?" I demanded. "My handwriting, my name, months before I ever came here." She turned then, spatula in hand, and for a moment her mask slipped. Fear flickered across her features, raw and immediate. "Some things can't be explained," she whispered. "Some things just are." I spent the day in the local library, digging through newspaper archives and police reports. The previous owner had been found in that same room, the last room, surrounded by mirrors he'd installed himself, all of them cracked, all bearing messages carved into the glass. The official cause of death was heart failure, but the investigating officer noted unusual circumstances in his report. The deceased had been found with his own driver's license in his hand, photo facing up. Security footage from a nearby establishment showed him entering the building, but no footage existed of him ever leaving. Yet his car was found parked downtown, keys still in the ignition, as if he'd simply walked away from his entire life. Witnesses reported seeing him in places he couldn't have been, at times that didn't match the timeline. His signature appeared on documents dated after his death. Bank transactions occurred from his account weeks later, small withdrawals that suggested someone was still using his cards. The case went cold. The official explanation involved identity theft and bureaucratic errors, but the investigating officer's personal notes buried in supplementary files told a different story. He'd received calls from people claiming to have met the deceased long after the funeral. Always the same description: a man who seemed confused about where he was, asking questions about time and place that made no sense. I returned to the bed and breakfast as evening fell. The proprietor was nowhere to be found, but the front door stood open. The guest book lay on the desk, pen beside it as if waiting for my signature. I flipped through the pages again, looking for my previous entry. It was gone. The page where my handwriting had been now showed only blank lines, as if the ink had never existed. But there was a new entry, one I didn't remember making. Same handwriting, same signature, but different words. "The mirror knows what you did." The room felt different when I entered, colder despite the radiator's steady hum. The crack in the mirror had spread, creating a web of fractures that caught the light in unsettling ways. The etched words had changed too, or perhaps I'd misread them before. Now they read, "You've been here before, you'll be here again." I called the police, but the responding officer seemed more interested in my mental state than in investigating my claims. He suggested stress, fatigue, the tricks an anxious mind can play. When I showed him the photographs I'd taken, the images were blurred beyond recognition, as if the camera had been moving despite my steady hands. "People see what they expect to see," he said, closing his notebook. "Old buildings, unfamiliar places, it's easy to get turned around." But I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd experienced. The question wasn't whether it had happened, but why it was happening to me. I checked out the next morning, eager to put distance between myself and that place. The proprietor had returned, settling my bill with hands that shook slightly as she processed the payment. She wouldn't meet my eyes as she handed me the receipt. Some guests come back, she said as I reached the door, even when they don't want to. I drove home, taking a different route to avoid the winding back roads that had brought me there. But somewhere along the way, I must have gotten confused. The landscape began to look familiar again, the curves of the road matching my memory despite my careful navigation. The bed and breakfast appeared around a bend, exactly as I'd left it. The same weathered sign, the same rundown exterior, the same sense of inevitability that had drawn me there in the first place. I parked in the same spot, walked to the same front desk, picked up the same pen. The guest book was open to a fresh page, waiting for my signature. My hand moved without conscious thought, forming letters I recognized but couldn't remember writing. The proprietor smiled as she handed me the key to the last room. "Welcome back," she said. "You're right on time." The mirror reflected my fractured image, and I understood finally that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some patterns can't be broken, no matter how many times you try to write a different ending. The room remembers everything, including the things you wish you could forget. And somewhere in the guest book, on a page I'll never find again, my handwriting warns the next visitor about the danger of staying in the last room. A warning I'll never remember giving, in a place I'll never recall leaving, for reasons that will forever remain just beyond my grasp. Crime 7, pinned to a grocery store bulletin board next to dog walkers and garage sales. I almost missed it. The photo looked like me, identical, even the scar above the lip. The name wasn't mine, but the birthday and height matched. The date of disappearance, years ago. I took the flyer and went home. My parents wouldn't talk about it. My ID started glitching at scanners. Facial recognition stopped working on my phone. Last week, I found someone watching me from across the street. He was holding the same flyer, and he smiled when I noticed. The paper felt different in my hands than regular printer stock. Thicker, more expensive, the kind used for important documents. I spread it flat on my kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light, studying every detail. The missing person's age progression showed what they might look like now. It was my face staring back at me, down to the small mole near my left ear that I'd always been self-conscious about. I called my mother first. Her voice changed the moment I mentioned finding something unusual. She became distant, mechanical, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized long ago. She said she was busy with household chores and hung up quickly. My father's phone went straight to voicemail. Neither returned my calls that evening. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house settling seemed amplified. I found myself checking the locks twice, then 3 times before finally lying down. The flyer sat on my nightstand, that familiar face watching me in the darkness. The next morning brought a strange discovery in my mailbox. A manila envelope with no return address containing photocopies of old newspaper clippings. Headlines about a child who vanished during a family camping trip. The articles were dated from when I would have been very young, too young to remember clearly. But something about the location mentioned in the stories felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. I decided to visit the local library to research further. The librarian, an elderly woman with kind eyes, helped me access archived records. As I scrolled through microfilm, she lingered nearby, occasionally glancing at my screen. When I found the original missing person report, she quietly placed a cup of coffee beside me and whispered that she remembered when those posters first appeared around town. The coffee grew cold as I read. The missing child had been found days later, safe but disoriented, with no memory of where they'd been. The family had moved away shortly after, seeking privacy and a fresh start. But here's what disturbed me most. The address listed in the report was 3 blocks from where I grew up. My parents had never mentioned living anywhere else. I photocopied everything and left quickly, feeling the librarian's eyes following me to the door. Outside, the same man from yesterday stood across the street. This time he wasn't holding the flyer. Instead, he was speaking quietly into his phone while watching me through the library's front windows. That evening, I confronted my parents directly. I spread the copies across their dining room table and demanded answers. My mother's hands shook as she picked up one of the clippings. My father sat heavily in his chair, suddenly looking much older than his years. They exchanged a look I'd never seen before, part fear, part resignation. My mother spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. She told me about the adoption papers they'd kept hidden in their bedroom safe, about how I'd come to them through unofficial channels, no agency involved, a private arrangement with people who said they couldn't care for me anymore, no questions asked, no background checks required. My father added details reluctantly. The people who brought me to them had been nervous, constantly checking over their shoulders. They'd insisted on meeting at different locations each time they arranged visits. The final handoff happened in a parking lot behind a closed restaurant with instructions to never try to contact them again. I felt the room spinning slightly as they spoke. The missing poster made sense now, but it raised even more questions. If I was the child who disappeared, then who found me? And why would anyone want to hide the fact that I'd been safely returned to a family? The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls to government offices and searches through public records. Every lead seemed to hit a dead end. The original investigating officers had retired or moved away. The case files had been archived in a facility that required special permission to access. Even the newspaper that had covered the story extensively had changed ownership multiple times. But the man watching me hadn't disappeared. He appeared at the coffee shop where I bought my morning drink, sitting 2 tables away with a newspaper held up to partially obscure his face. He was there when I visited the bank, standing in line behind me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something sharp and medicinal that made my stomach turn. I finally approached him outside the post office, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Up close, he looked ordinary, middle-aged, tired eyes, clothing that suggested an office job somewhere. When I asked if I could help him with something, he smiled the same smile I'd seen from across the street. He said he was just making sure I was settling in well to my research project. His choice of words chilled me. How did he know what I was doing? I asked him directly who he was and why he was following me. He handed me a business card with just a phone number printed on it, no name or company. He said when I was ready to learn the whole truth, I should call. Then he walked away, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. I stared at that card for hours before finally dialing the number. A woman answered, professional but warm, like she'd been expecting my call. She said there were things about my situation that my adoptive parents couldn't have known, things that had required careful monitoring over the years. She offered to meet me somewhere public to explain further. We arranged to meet at a diner across town. She arrived exactly on schedule, a thin woman in her 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around us. She slid into the booth across from me and immediately began speaking in low, measured tones. She told me about witness protection programs that operate off the books, about families who need to disappear for reasons that never make it into official reports, about children who get caught in the middle of situations too dangerous and complicated for conventional law enforcement to handle. My case, she explained, had been one of the more challenging ones. According to her, the family I'd been taken from had been involved in something that put everyone around them at risk. The disappearance had been staged to create distance and buy time for a safer placement. My adoptive parents had been chosen carefully, vetted thoroughly, but kept in the dark about the full circumstances for their own protection. But now, she continued, the original threat had resurfaced. The people responsible for the initial danger had been released from prison and were asking questions about what happened to that missing child. The surveillance I'd noticed wasn't meant to frighten me, it was meant to protect me. She slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside were documents that confirmed everything she'd told me, along with new identification papers and an address several states away. She said I could choose to relocate again, assume a completely new identity, and continue living safely, or I could stay and take my chances with whatever consequences might follow. I left the diner without giving her an answer, the envelope burning against my chest where I'd tucked it inside my jacket. The man who'd been watching me was nowhere to be seen, but I felt eyes on me everywhere I went. Every stranger seemed potentially dangerous. Every unexpected sound made me flinch. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table with the original missing poster spread out beside the new documents. Two different versions of my identity, both real in their own way, both offering a kind of truth I wasn't sure I wanted to accept. The face in that old photograph stared up at me, innocent and unaware of the complexity that would follow. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, just an address and a date from last week. I recognized the address. It was the location where my adoptive parents said they'd first met the people who brought me to them. The date was the day after I'd found the missing poster. Someone had been there recently, someone who knew exactly what I was looking for and when I'd started looking for it. The question that kept me awake that night wasn't who was watching me or even why. It was whether the person I'd become over all these years was someone worth protecting, and whether the truth I was chasing would destroy everything I thought I knew about the life I'd built. The envelope of new documents remained unopened on my counter, a door to another life that I wasn't ready to walk through. But every day I delayed making that choice. The weight of not knowing seemed to grow heavier. And somewhere out there, people were making decisions about my future based on information I still didn't fully understand. The missing poster had started it all, but I was beginning to realize it might be the least important piece of a puzzle, much larger and more dangerous than I'd imagined. Crime 8, they released the image on the local news, a grainy sketch from a witness after a gas station stabbing. I wasn't watching, but my neighbor called me over, said the sketch looked just like me. It did every line, every shadow, but the hand held a knife I've never owned. The shirt was one I'd thrown away months ago. The station said the suspect fled on foot and disappeared into the woods. I haven't been in the woods in years. Still, that night I found leaves in my laundry and mud on my boots. The next morning I sat in my kitchen staring at those boots. The mud was dark, almost black, with small twigs embedded in the treads. I couldn't remember the last time I'd walked anywhere that wasn't paved. My daily routine was simple: home to office, office to grocery store to home. The same routes I'd driven for 3 years. I called in sick to work. Something about the sketch wouldn't leave my mind, not just the resemblance, but the details. The witness had described the way I hold my shoulders when I'm nervous, the slight tilt of my head when I'm concentrating, things only someone who knew me would notice. The gas station was 6 blocks from my house. I drove there slowly, windows down, trying to remember if I'd been there recently. The smell of gasoline mixed with something else as I pulled into the parking lot, something metallic and sharp that made my stomach turn. Police tape still fluttered around the entrance, and dark stains marked the concrete near the door. The clerk inside was new. young, with tired eyes that seemed to look right through me. I bought a bottle of water I didn't want and asked about what happened. She shrugged, said she hadn't been working that night, but she kept glancing at my hands as she counted my change. Her fingers trembled slightly when our skin touched. I walked to the spot where it happened. The stains were rust-colored now, mixed with dirt and rain. Standing there, I felt a strange familiarity wash over me. Not memory exactly, but something deeper, like muscle memory. My body seemed to know this place. That evening I went through my clothes, every shirt, every pair of pants, looking for something I might have missed. In the bottom of my hamper I found a t-shirt I didn't recognize, gray cotton, soft from wear. There was a small tear near the left shoulder and a faint stain on the front that could have been anything. Blood, ketchup, coffee, but it smelled like fear. I drove to the woods behind the gas station. The police had searched there for days, according to the news reports, found nothing. But as I walked the narrow trails, my feet seemed to know where to step. Branches parted easily, like they remembered me. Deep in the trees, I found a clearing where the ground was disturbed, leaves scattered in patterns that didn't match the wind. Something glinted in the dirt. I knelt down, my hands shaking as I brushed away the debris. A small piece of metal, part of a knife handle. The grip was worn smooth, like it had been held many times, like it had been gripped tight in a moment of panic or rage. I should have called the police, should have turned it in immediately. Instead, I wrapped it in my shirt and took it home. That night I sat at my kitchen table, turning the fragment over in my hands. It felt familiar, too familiar. My phone rang, unknown number. I answered without thinking. A voice I almost recognized said my name, asked if I'd seen the news, said they knew it was me in that sketch, but instead of threatening, the voice sounded sad, disappointed, like they'd expected better from me. I hung up and checked my doors, all locked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. That someone had been watching for a long time. The next morning I found a newspaper on my doorstep, not my usual paper. This one was folded to an article about the stabbing. Someone had circled certain words with red ink, words that, when read together, spelled out a message I didn't want to understand. I spent the day at the library researching the case, reading witness statements, police reports, anything I could find. The victim was a stranger to me, at least I thought he was, but in the hospital photo there was something about his eyes, something that tugged at a memory I couldn't quite reach. The witness who saw the stabbing lived 2 streets over from me. I walked past her house that afternoon, casual, like I was just out for air. She was in her garden, tending to roses. When she looked up and saw me, her face went white. She dropped her pruning shears and hurried inside. But not before I saw recognition in her eyes, not the recognition of someone identifying a stranger from a sketch, the recognition of someone who knew me personally. That night I dreamed of the gas station, but in the dream I wasn't watching from outside. I was there in the moment, feeling the weight of something in my hand, feeling the shock of impact, hearing the sound that metal makes when it meets resistance. I woke with my hands cramped, like I'd been gripping something tight all night. My sheets were twisted, damp with sweat that smelled like panic. The police came to my door 3 days later, not to arrest me, they said, just to ask questions. They wanted to know about my whereabouts, my relationship with the victim, whether I owned any knives. I answered truthfully, or as truthfully as I could with gaps in my memory that seemed to grow larger each day. They left without incident, but I saw them watching my house afterward. Unmarked cars parked just far enough away to seem casual. Figures moving past my windows at odd hours. I started keeping a journal, trying to piece together my missing time. but the harder I tried to remember, the more confused I became. Days blended together. Conversations I was sure had turned out to be dreams. People I thought I knew claimed they'd never seen me before. The fragment of knife handle disappeared from my kitchen table. I searched everywhere, tearing apart drawers and cabinets, but it was gone, like it had never existed, like I'd imagined the whole thing. But I still felt its weight in my palm when I closed my eyes. The witness moved away suddenly. Her house went up for sale with no warning, and she was gone within a week. I walked past the empty place every day, hoping to understand what she'd seen, what she'd recognized in me that I couldn't see in myself. The case went cold. The police stopped watching my house. The news moved on to other stories, but I remained trapped in that moment, in that sketch, holding a knife I'd never owned, wearing a shirt I'd thrown away, standing in a place I'd never been. Sometimes I catch myself checking my hands for stains that aren't there. Sometimes I find myself driving toward the gas station without remembering why. Sometimes I wake up with mud on my feet and leaves in my hair, and I tell myself it's just sleepwalking. But deep down, in a place I don't want to explore, I know the truth is waiting, and I'm not sure I'm ready to meet it. Crime 9. At an estate sale, I found a heavy wooden box marked "Do Not Open." Naturally, I did. The second the lid cracked, I heard it, a blood-curdling scream, muffled and sharp. It didn't echo. It didn't trail. It stopped as soon as I closed it. Inside, nothing. Just a photo of a basement door I didn't recognize, but I felt something then, a pull, a need to find that door. I've started driving through neighborhoods, slowing down at houses with basements. And last night, I found the one from the picture. The door was open, and someone was waiting inside. The woman at the estate sale had nervous hands. I noticed them first, fingers that couldn't stay still, picking at the price tags, smoothing down papers that weren't wrinkled. She watched me examine the box with an intensity that made my skin crawl. When I asked about it, she just shrugged and said it belonged to her late husband, but her voice caught on the word "late," and she wouldn't meet my eyes. I should have walked away then, should have listened to the way she kept glancing at the box like it might bite her. Instead, I handed over the cash and carried it to my car. The weight of it surprised me, not just heavy, but dense, like it was full of secrets pressing against the wood from the inside. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light, every turn, I could feel the box in my backseat, silent but somehow demanding attention. My hands kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see something that wasn't there. The radio crackled with static, and I found myself turning it off, preferring the silence to the distorted voices bleeding through the speakers. In my living room, under the soft glow of table lamps, the box looked different, smaller somehow, more innocent. The warning carved into its lid seemed less ominous, almost quaint. I traced the letters with my finger, "Do Not Open," and felt the rough texture of the wood beneath my skin. It was old, worn smooth in places by countless hands. I wondered who else had touched it, who else had felt this same pull. The first time I opened it, the scream froze my blood. It wasn't a recording, too raw, too desperate. It was the sound of someone in genuine terror, someone who knew they were about to die. I slammed the lid shut and backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs, but the silence that followed was worse than the scream. It was the kind of quiet that makes you question what you just heard, what you just experienced. I opened it again, had to. The scream came again, identical in pitch and duration, but this time I forced myself to listen. There was something familiar about it, something that nagged at the edges of my memory. I closed the box and sat on my couch, staring at it, trying to place that voice, but memories have a way of hiding when you need them most. The photograph was tucked against the bottom of the box, easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. A basement door painted white but chipped around the edges. The The metal handle was old brass, tarnished but still functional. Behind it, darkness. But it was the details around the door that caught my attention, the particular way the concrete floor was cracked, the angle of the wooden stairs leading down. I'd seen this before. Not in person, but in dreams maybe, or in passing through neighborhoods I couldn't quite remember. I started carrying the photo with me, folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet, checking it whenever I had a spare moment. It became a habit, an obsession. I'd pull it out at traffic lights, at lunch breaks, during conversations that didn't hold my interest. The image never changed, but my understanding of it did. Each time I looked, I noticed something new, a water stain on the wall, a scratch in the paint, the way the light fell across the threshold. The first house I checked was wrong. The basement door was similar but too new, too clean. The owner was a young mother who looked at me with suspicion when I asked about previous residents. She told me they'd bought the house 5 years ago, renovated everything. But she invited me in any way, maybe sensing my disappointment. The basement was finished, carpeted, full of children's toys and exercise equipment. Nothing like the cold, empty space in the photograph. I thanked her and left, but I could feel her watching from the window as I walked back to my car. I sat there for a long time, studying the photo again, wondering if I'd made a mistake. But the pull was still there, stronger now, like a magnetic field drawing me forward. The second house was closer. An elderly man answered the door, stooped and gray, with hands that shook slightly when he spoke. He looked at the photo for a long time, longer than politeness would normally allow. When he handed it back, his eyes were different, guarded, maybe frightened. "Haven't seen this place in years," he said, but his voice was carefully neutral. "Looks familiar, though. Might be from the old neighborhood before they tore everything down." He gave me directions to a part of town I'd never explored, streets with names I'd never heard. As I drove away, I watched him in my rearview mirror. He stood in his doorway until I turned the corner, and something about his posture suggested he was memorizing my license plate. The third house was empty, abandoned, maybe foreclosed. The windows were boarded up, but not well. I could see gaps where the plywood had warped, spaces large enough to peer through. The basement door was around back, tucked beneath a set of concrete steps that led to what used to be a back entrance. This was it. The same chipped paint, the same brass handle, the same darkness beyond. I didn't go in right away. Instead, I sat in my car, engine running, studying the house. It was the kind of place that attracted attention for all the wrong reasons: overgrown yard, peeling siding, a general air of neglect that made the neighbors nervous. But it was also the kind of place where someone could disappear without anyone asking questions. When I finally approached the door, my hands were shaking, not from fear exactly, but from recognition. This was the place I'd been looking for, the destination I'd been pulled toward since the moment I opened that box. The brass handle was cold under my palm, and when I turned it, the door opened with a soft creak that seemed to echo in the empty spaces above. The basement was exactly as I'd expected, and nothing like I'd imagined. Dark, yes, but not empty. There were things down here, old furniture covered in dust sheets, boxes stacked against the walls, a workbench with tools laid out like someone had just stepped away. And there was a smell, not decay, not death, but something older, something that spoke of secrets kept too long. I found the recorder first, an old cassette player, the kind with a built-in microphone. It was sitting on the workbench, a tape already loaded. When I pressed play, I heard my own voice, but younger, more desperate. I was screaming, begging someone to let me go. But I don't remember being here before, don't remember making this recording. The photographs were in a box beside the recorder, dozens of them, all showing the same basement door from different angles in different lighting. But in some of them I could see myself in the background, always looking away, always unaware I was being watched. The dates on the back went back years, long before I'd ever heard of the estate sale or the wooden box. I'm still here now in this basement trying to understand. The woman at the estate sale, I think she might have been my wife. The nervous hands, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. I think she was trying to tell me something, trying to warn me or remind me. But memories are funny things. They hide when you need them most, and they surface when you're not ready to face them. The box is here too, sitting on the workbench beside the recorder. I haven't opened it again, but I can hear it sometimes, a soft scratching from inside like fingernails against wood. I know what I'll find when I finally lift that lid. I know whose scream I'll hear. But I'm not ready yet, not ready to remember what I did down here, what I've been trying to forget. The door is still open, just like it was in the photograph, and I'm still waiting, just like I was that night. Waiting for someone to find me, to complete the circle that started with a box I should never have opened. The pull is still there, stronger than ever, but now I understand it wasn't drawing me towards something, it was drawing me back. Back to this basement, back to this moment, back to the truth I've been running from, and now that I'm here, I don't think I can leave again. The scream is getting louder. Story 10. In the vast expanse of the attic, tucked away beneath a worn and forgotten blanket, they stumbled upon it. A porcelain doll with delicate features and an air of antiquity, its blue eyes painted wide and unblinking. Sarah and Michael, a young couple captivated by the allure of a Victorian house they had purchased at auction, gazed upon the doll with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. It was an unexpected discovery, one that they quickly dismissed as just another relic of the past. As night descended and they retreated to their bed, a subtle unease began to linger in the air. The stillness of the house seemed to stretch endlessly, and a heaviness settled upon their chests. Morning light revealed a chilling sight. The doll, once nestled in the attic, now perched at the foot of their bed, its gaze fixed upon them with an unsettling intensity. Detective Rachel Winters, a beacon of logic in a world veiled in shadows, was summoned to the scene on a crisp autumn morning. The master bedroom bore witness to a macabre display. The female victim, her body contorted in an unnatural pose, eyes wide with fear. Nearby in the hallway, the male victim lay as if in a final attempt to escape an unseen horror. With meticulous precision, Detective Winters combed through the evidence, each detail meticulously documented. The positioning of the victim spoke of a deliberate hand, a methodical madness that defied conventional explanation. As the investigation unfolded, whispers of strange occurrences within the old house began to surface, shadows dancing in empty rooms, laughter echoing through the halls in the dead of night. Forensic analysis unveiled a haunting truth. Traces of vintage fabrics, akin to those used in antique doll clothing, lingered in the air. Yet no tangible presence could be found, no fingerprints, no DNA, no footprints to trace the phantom that had wrought such devastation. Delving into the annals of the house's history, Detective Winters unearthed a chilling pattern. Tragedy had befallen the previous owners, each meeting a mysterious end shrouded in unanswered questions. A tale emerged of a doll maker and his daughter, their lives intertwined with the very walls of the house, secrets buried within its time-worn foundation. Old photographs whispered of a darker truth, a doll, identical to the one found by Sarah and Michael, its presence spanning decades with an eerie persistence. The dollmaker's creations, imbued with a life beyond the ordinary, seemed to defy the boundaries of time and space. As the investigation spiraled into the realm of the supernatural, a distant relative of the dollmaker shared tales of arcane rituals and forbidden knowledge. Whispers of spirits bound to inanimate forms, of dolls crafted with human elements to grant them a semblance of life, cast a chilling shadow over the case. But the truth remained elusive, slipping through the cracks of rationality, evading the grasp of logic. The doll, a silent witness to unspeakable horrors, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and lingering dread. And so the house changed hands once more, its legacy of darkness overshadowing its architectural grandeur. The attic, a silent witness to the mysteries that lay within, remained untouched by the new owners, a testament to the fear that still clung to its time-worn walls. Detective Winters, haunted by the specter of the dollmaker's legacy, retired into the somber embrace of solitude, bearing witness to a truth that defied explanation. The photograph, a relic of a past best left undisturbed, remained sealed away, a silent reminder of the darkness that lurked within the folds of memory. And on quiet nights when the world slumbered in peaceful ignorance, whispers of a bygone era stirred in the shadows. The laughter of a child, the soft patter of tiny footsteps, echoes of a past that refused to be forgotten, lingering in the stillness of the night. Story 11. The tale of the new homeowners and the enigmatic intercom system was not just a mere oddity to them. Late at night, the crackling of the old intercom had a mysterious allure, a remnant from a bygone era, revamped but left in obscurity. One fateful night, curiosity got the best of the husband as he pressed the button, and a whisper, filled with an eerie tone, crackled through the speaker. "Why did you come back?" Startled, he recoiled, his trembling hands betraying his unease. His wife, standing silently behind him, softly uttered, "I never said that." Nestled among ancient oak trees, the Victorian manor exuded an aura of secrets, its weathered facade contrasting with the modern features hidden within. Daniel and Meredith Parker, the new owners, had been drawn to the property by its history and charm, despite the real estate agent's evident nervousness during the showing. The vintage intercom system, linking all rooms, had been a selling point for the history-loving couple. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property, the gravel beneath her unmarked vehicle's tires creating a soothing crunch. The call had initially been about a possible break-in, but a subtle undertone in the dispatcher's voice hinted at a deeper mystery. Daniel Parker, a tall figure with a ghostly pallor, welcomed her at the door, leading her through the grand foyer as he recounted the strange events. "It all started with the intercom," he explained, his voice tinged with apprehension. Static, then whispers, then full sentences. My wife thought I was imagining it until she heard it too. In the living room, Meredith sat stiffly on an antique sofa, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug left untouched. Without preamble, she disclosed, "We found something hidden behind the wall." Daniel was expanding the kitchen pantry, and as he tore down the drywall, her voice trailed off. Behind the wall, swathed in deteriorating plastic, they had unearthed a small leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves, gloved hands carefully handling the fragile pages, discovered the elegant yet frantic handwriting of Alina, the journal's previous owner. The entries chronicled Alina's mounting suspicions of her husband Vincent's malevolent intentions. The last entry dates back 30 years, Daniel elucidated. After that, silence. The previous owners mentioned purchasing the house from an elderly man who had moved to a retirement community. Further investigation unveiled the chilling truth of Vincent and Alina Blackwood, the former owners. Records indicated Vincent had sold the house shortly after Alina's disappearance, with no trace of her whereabouts or activities post the final journal entry. A thorough examination of the property unearthed anomalies beneath the garden shed's concrete foundation. As the team broke through the aged concrete, human remains emerged, validating the suspicions. Forensic analysis confirmed the skeleton as that of a woman in her 40s, showing signs of blunt force trauma to the skull. A gold wedding band inscribed with "To Eleanor, my eternal love," was discovered among the remains, adding a somber finality to the grim discovery. The evidence swiftly built a case against Vincent Blackwood, now elderly and residing in a care facility. His chilling response upon confrontation sent shivers down even the seasoned detective's spine. She wouldn't cease her incessant chatter, Vincent confessed, his voice eerily tranquil. Always through that infernal intercom, prying, questioning. I disconnected it, but she rewired it herself, claiming she needed to reach me always. His vacant gaze met theirs. I only wanted peace. In his confession, Vincent detailed the elaborate deception he had spun, fabricating the narrative of Eleanor's departure by sending forged postcards and maintaining a facade for years. The trial ended swiftly with Vincent's guilty plea. The sentencing judge acknowledged the premeditated nature of the crime and the decades of deceit that followed. Daniel and Meredith, unable to bear the weight of the house's dark past, sold the property. Before departing, they held a solemn memorial for Eleanor in the restored garden. The intercom system, a bearer of eerie whispers, was removed during renovations by the subsequent owners. Workers reported hearing static and murmurs during the removal, attributing it to interference from their tools. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file before it was archived, pondering how the house had unraveled its own secrets across time. The justice system had finally caught up with Vincent Blackwood, all thanks to Eleanor's resolute voice breaking through the veil of silence. Among local law enforcement, the case earned the moniker, "The House That Answered Back." Occasionally on her way home, Detective Reeves would pass by the property. Without halting, she slowed her vehicle, the window cracked open just a fraction, receptive to any whispers carried by the gentle breeze, a reminder of the voices that had once echoed through the walls of the enigmatic manor. Story 12: The Enigmatic House. The town held its breath, never mentioning the house at the edge of the woods. It stood solitary, a silent sentinel with blackened windows and a porch weighed down by the passage of time. No one laid claim to its ownership, and its origins remained shrouded in mystery, lost to the whispers of the wind. A group of hikers, drawn by curiosity or perhaps by fate, ventured too close one day. Amongst the weathered facade, they beheld a peculiar sight, names etched into the wooden siding, carved deep as ancient runes. And at the very bottom, untouched by the ravages of time, was a name unfamiliar to them all, a name that sent shivers down their spines, until in a hushed voice one of them dared to utter, "That's mine." When the call came in under the cloak of night, the dispatch noted it as a routine trespassing incident. Mason Wright, the lead hiker who discovered his name marked upon the abandoned house, spoke with a tremor in his voice. The responding officers anticipated teenage mischief or a jest among friends, but what awaited them defied all logic. As darkness descended upon the forest, Detective Sarah Keller arrived, her flashlight cutting through the shadows to reveal the enigmatic structure. The names of 27 souls adorned the eastern wall, some fading into obscurity while others remained stark as if freshly carved. And at the end of the list, Mason Wright, the cut still fragrant with the scent of sawdust. "I've never set foot here before," Mason declared, his breath mingling with the icy air. "How could anyone know my name?" Thus began an investigation that would unravel the very fabric of reality. Background checks on each name led to chilling revelations. Every name belonged to a missing person, their disappearances spanning 4 decades. Some cases lay dormant, while others remained open wounds. Yet the common thread was undeniable: all had vanished while wandering these very woods alone. Forensic analysts meticulously documented each carving, noting the nuances of depth, technique, and weathering. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, harkened back to a tragedy from 37 years past, a tale of a young woman swallowed by the forest, leaving behind only a lone boot by a stream. Mason's alibi remained steadfast under scrutiny. He and his college friends had stumbled upon this place by chance, guided by an online whim. His innocence seemed unquestionable, his ties to the macabrelist inexplicable. The focus shifted to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, revealed images that harbored a sinister secret, a spectral figure looming in the background of multiple photographs, a specter unseen by human eyes. A search of the desolate house unearthed a cryptic trove in the basement, personal effects of the missing hikers meticulously displayed on wooden shelves, each item bearing a name from the haunting wall outside. Bloodstains, long faded but not forgotten, whispered of untold horrors. Amidst mounting paranoia and inexplicable phenomena, Mason found himself at the center of a nightmare. Whispers, footprints, and phantom figures haunted his every waking moment, leading to a sinister revelation buried in the annals of the past. The house, it was discovered, had once belonged to a recluse named Victor Blackwood, a hunter of shadows who had vanished into obscurity 15 years prior. His dark legacy unfurled like a malevolent tapestry, weaving a tale of predation and obsession. A journal found within a hidden hunting blind chronicled Blackwood's descent into madness, his prey shifting from beasts of the forest to unsuspecting hikers. His words painted a portrait of a chilling pursuit, a game of life and death played out in the shadows. The manhunt for Blackwood spanned jurisdictions, a hunt for a phantom that eluded all attempts at capture. Mason, caught in the web of darkness, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a cryptic message etched in his empty room. As the mystery deepened, a sinister truth emerged from the bowels of the house, a workshop hidden behind a false wall, a carving bearing the name of a forensic technician who had vanished without a trace, mirroring the fates of those before him. Surveillance tightened around the house, a web of cameras and sensors poised to ensnare the elusive figure that haunted the woods. And one fateful night, as the darkness stirred, a tall, shadowy presence emerged from the forest, slipping through the grasp of mortal hands. To this day, the house stands under vigilant watch, a monument to unsolved mysteries and whispered fears. The names on the wall linger as a grim reminder of the darkness that lurks within the heart of the woods, a tale that no one dares to utter, lest they too be swallowed by its chilling embrace. Story 13. In the quiet solitude of her bathroom, she cleared the mist from the mirror, expecting to see her familiar reflection staring back at her. But an unsettling feeling crept in, a subtle shift in the air. Her features appeared unchanged, her attire the same as always. Yet as her gaze lingered, a sense of unease settled in. A fleeting movement caught in the corner of her eye, a flicker of something unfamiliar. And when she turned away, her reflection remained fixed, watching. Thus began the enigmatic tale of Rebecca Thorne, a woman whose life took a bewildering turn on that fateful day. Residing in a modest apartment within a serene suburban enclave, Rebecca led a structured existence, known to her acquaintances as methodical and reserved. Her days revolved around the precision of her work as a data analyst, her interactions with the outside world minimal but polite. Little did anyone suspect that she would soon become enmeshed in a mystery that would baffle investigators and linger in the minds of the community for years to come. The initial signs were subtle, easily dismissed as mere quirks of daily life. Objects within Rebecca's abode began to shift inexplicably, a coffee mug relocated, books rearranged, her toothbrush out of place. At first, she brushed off these anomalies as tricks of her fatigued mind, a byproduct of endless hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights. It wasn't until a series of incidents persisted, unsettling in their mundanity, that Rebecca reached out to the authorities. Detective Marion Shaw, tasked with unraveling the enigma surrounding Rebecca, initially viewed the situation with skepticism. The absence of concrete evidence pointed more towards a psychological dilemma than a criminal act. However, the inexplicable events took a sinister turn with the infamous bathroom mirror episode, an event that would alter the course of the investigation. Recounting the chilling experience to the police, Rebecca detailed how her reflection seemed to move independently, casting a disconcerting shadow over her solitude. Armed with footage from a strategically placed security camera, the truth unfolded before the eyes of law enforcement. The video captured Rebecca departing for work, only to reveal a doppelganger entering her residence shortly thereafter, someone identical in appearance and mannerisms, yet distinctly separate from the real Rebecca. As Detective Shaw delved deeper into the case, a pattern emerged from the shadows. The sinister imposter only made their presence known during specific intervals when Rebecca ventured out for predetermined engagements. It was a calculated intrusion, a meticulous study of her routines and habits. The revelation hinted at a fixation, an obsession veiled in mimicry and deception. The investigation took a harrowing turn with the mention of Lily Winters, a former colleague of Rebecca's with a troubled past. Lily's unsettling fixation on Rebecca manifested in a chilling display of emulation, culminating in a nightmarish revelation within her residence. A shrine dedicated to Rebecca, complete with meticulous replicas of her possessions and a haunting collection of covertly captured moments, painted a portrait of obsession bordering on the macabre. As the authorities closed in on Lily, she slipped through their grasp, leaving behind a void of uncertainty and dread. Rebecca, now cloaked in protective custody, watched from afar as her life was usurped by a phantom. The echoes of her existence reverberated through the hollow halls of her former workplace, a twisted reminder of the identity she once held dear. To this day, the mystery remains unsolved, a testament to the chilling reality that identity is a fragile construct, easily distorted and manipulated by those with darker intentions. In the quiet of her safe haven, Rebecca guards a new persona, a shield against the haunting specter of her past. And Detective Shaw, with a solemn gaze fixed upon the photograph of two eerily similar faces, carries the weight of a truth that lingers in the shadows, a reminder that sometimes the truest horrors dwell within the depths of our own reflections. Story 14. Once upon a time, it began with a mere flicker, a glitch in the baby monitor's feed. At first, the mother brushed it off as mere interference, a blip in the technology. However, as time unfolded, the audio crackled and a voice, soft as a whisper in the night, spoke, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill ran down her spine, freezing her blood in its tracks. With a racing heart, she dashed to her son's room, only to find the crib empty, devoid of the warmth that once filled it. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only disruption in the tranquil room was a plush rabbit lying on the floor, its glossy black eyes fixed upon her, almost accusingly. Rebecca's screams echoed through the house until her voice grew hoarse, a rawness seeping into her very being. The neighbors, startled by her distress, swiftly summoned emergency aid. When the authorities arrived, they discovered her cradling the stuffed rabbit, swaying back and forth on the nursery floor, lost in a nightmare made real. Samuel, her 4-month-old infant, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that consumed her whole. The initial inquiry yielded little, a frustrating maze with no clear path forward. No signs of forced entry marred the home, the security system standing sentry throughout the night. The recorded footage from the baby monitor offered only a glimpse of the eerie voice and static that had pierced the silence of the night. How could an intruder slip in, steal a child, and vanish without a trace, leaving only a haunting whisper in their wake? Suspicions turned toward Rebecca, the mother left behind in the wake of her son's disappearance. Daniel, her husband, had been absent on business, their strained marriage a silent witness to the struggles they faced since Samuel's arrival. Medical records whispered of Rebecca's battle with postpartum shadows that threatened to engulf her. Her composure during questioning raised eyebrows, her demeanor unsettlingly serene for a mother robbed of her child. Whispers drifted through the community, casting shadows of doubt upon her grief-stricken soul. Then a glimmer of hope emerged amidst the darkness. Tiny fibers foreign to the household clung to the nursery windowsill, hinting at a clandestine entry from outside. A rare climbing rope, its fibers entwined with secrets, painted a picture of a skilled intruder scaling the heights to reach the nursery's sanctum. The focus shifted, unveiling a shadowy figure moving through the night, captured by vigilant neighbors' security cameras. A boot print in the garden's soil bore the mark of a trained climber, leaving questions lingering in the air. Daniel's return brought a new layer of complexity to the unfolding mystery. Distraught and bewildered, his hands bore the telltale signs of a hobby rock climbing, a recent pursuit to tame his inner turmoil. Financial records whispered of a darker truth, a substantial insurance policy taken out on Samuel's fragile life. Mysterious calls to an unknown number painted a web of deceit, casting shadows upon his grief-stricken facade. As the threads of the investigation wove a tapestry of betrayal, the baby monitor emerged as a silent witness to the truth. Hacked and manipulated, its digital eyes revealed a twisted game played from the shadows. The voice that beckoned sleep was not born within the nursery, but a malicious intrusion from afar, shattering the fragile peace of a mother's heart. The hunt led to a basement, a hidden chamber where Samuel lay cradled in the arms of Elaine, a woman lost to her own grief and desperation. Elaine, handcuffed and hollow-eyed, surrendered to a truth long buried beneath layers of deceit. Her connection to Daniel, a past entwined in loss and longing, painted a portrait of desperation that knew no bounds. The trial unveiled a tapestry of deception, woven with encrypted messages detailing a plan born of greed and heartache. Daniel's denial crumbled beneath the weight of evidence, his cough a damning echo of guilt in the night air. The jury's swift deliberation sealed their fate, condemning them for their sins against innocence. Rebecca and Samuel sought solace in a new beginning, a world free from the shadows of the past. The case left a mark on the investigative landscape, a cautionary tale of modern evils lurking in the digital shadows. Baby monitors stood sentinel, their vulnerabilities exposed to the light of scrutiny. Parents fortified their nurseries, a shield against the darkness that sought to steal their children away. Samuel grew up in the embrace of a mother's love, shielded from the whispers of a night long forgotten. Rebecca kept the stuffed rabbit, a silent sentinel locked away, a reminder of the truth that lurked in the darkness. The monitor, a silent witness to the unfolding drama, held the key to a mystery that defied all expectations. Story 15, amidst the hush of a forgotten era, she crossed the threshold of the desolate mansion, a dance of dust particles in the stagnant air. The house, a relic of bygone days, stood frozen in time, its walls shedding memories, its furniture draped in veils of neglect. Each step she took felt like a journey into a suspended reality, a realm untouched by the passage of time save for one peculiar aspect: the doors. No matter which she opened, each doorway led her back to the same parlor, a loop of never-ending return. a labyrinth of portals that defied logic, trapping her in a perpetual cycle of familiarity. The only escape lay in retracing her steps, yet when she turned to seek the comfort of the entrance, the front door had vanished into thin air, leaving her stranded in a maze of repetition. The revelation of Morgan Pierce's lifeless form transformed the once abandoned Victorian into a scene of intrigue and despair. Detective Sarah Lind stood at the threshold, a silent observer to the spectral ballet of forensic specialists moving through the dim expanse like phantoms in the night. The house, once whispered about in local folklore for its unsettling mysteries, now harbored secrets far grimmer than mere tales. Preliminary findings suggest a time of death approximately 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his words barely a whisper in the heavy silence. Cause of death points to asphyxiation. Morgan's body had been discovered in the parlor, her posture serene, hands clasped in repose as if awaiting a visitor. No signs of struggle tainted the tranquil tableau, no marks of resistance etched upon her form. An eerie tranquility shrouded the room, a stillness that unsettled even the seasoned investigators. "Who stumbled upon the body?" Lind inquired, her gaze scanning the pages of her notes. "A real estate agent showcasing the property to potential buyers," her partner replied. Upon entering, they beheld her seated there, mistaking her for an intruder until they drew near. The mansion had languished unoccupied since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly half a decade prior. Legal disputes had rendered the property unwanted, unsold, a forgotten relic save for the occasional trespasser seeking thrills in its decaying embrace. Morgan Pierce, a studious 26-year-old, delved into the realm of architectural anomalies for her academic pursuits. Known for her meticulous nature, ambition, and fascination with spaces that defied conventional logic, the abandoned Victorian with its enigmatic reputation must have beckoned to her with irresistible allure. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days prior, Lind remarked. Morgan spoke of visiting the house where wanderers lose their way for her research. As the investigation unfolded, a pattern emerged: Morgan's repeated visits to the enigmatic mansion in the weeks leading up to her demise. Entries in her journal chronicled peculiar acoustic phenomena, chilling drafts in unexpected corners, and doors that led to ever-shifting chambers. In her final musings, she spoke of plans to document the elusive spatial irregularities she had encountered. Yet the equipment she intended to employ remained conspicuously absent. An autopsy uncovered a perplexing detail: an infusion of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, a substance derived from plants used in esoteric rituals. Though capable of inducing disorientation and vivid visions, the quantity found was insufficient to prove fatal. She was no casual user, her partner stated emphatically during interrogation. Morgan adhered strictly to her research ethics. Deliberately distorting her perception would have been inconceivable to her. Examination of Morgan's digital trail unveiled traces of erased correspondence on her phone, dialogues with a kindred spirit intrigued by the mysteries of the house, someone who professed to grasp its enigmas. The exchanges grew intimate and enigmatic, hinting at a shared understanding of hidden truths. The house retains memories of its past, one message cryptically revealed. It yearns for revelation. The trail of investigation led Lynn to Adam Reeves, an authority on architectural history who had engaged in discourse with Morgan. His expertise in rare spatial phenomena had captivated her, forging a bond that transcended professional boundaries. When questioned, Reeves expressed genuine grief at Morgan's demise. "The house harbors a legacy," he divulged. "Its architect wove illusions and distortions into its very fabric, aiming to confound and disorient." Morgan believed a deeper significance lay concealed within its walls, a truth beyond mere optical tricks. Yet Reeves possessed an alibi for the suspected time of Morgan's passing, substantiated by footage of his presence at a scholarly gathering hours away. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source: Alina Blackwood's grandson, residing abroad. Contacted by the authorities, he unveiled a family secret buried beneath the sands of time. "My grandmother was not the sole Blackwood to meet their end in that house," he disclosed. Others succumbed within its walls, always discovered in the parlor, their countenances serene. The family termed it the claiming, furnishing investigators with decades-old journals. He chronicled deaths initially attributed to natural causes, a pattern emerging of individuals falling prey to the enigmatic force dubbed the influence after prolonged exposure to the house. A secondary sweep of the estate uncovered a concealed alcove behind the parlor hearth. Within its recesses lay Morgan's missing apparatus and a trove of artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, arranged in a meticulous geometric tableau. At its heart resided a weathered figurine, its visage smoothed by the passage of time and touch across generations. Analysis identified the effigy as a representation of a deity linked to liminal spaces, thresholds between worlds. Traces of the alkaloid discovered in Morgan's system adorned the relics, binding her fate to their ancient present. The investigation took an unforeseen turn as forensic analysis of the residence's dust patterns unveiled a spectral presence lingering at the time of Morgan's demise. Partial fingerprints, distinct from Morgan's or any documented visitor, adorned the doorknobs throughout the house. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered lifeless in his dwelling. Mirroring Morgan's repose, he sat poised towards the entrance, a whisper of peace upon his features, the same alkaloid staining his system. Clenched in his grasp lay a key that defied all locks in his abode, yet nestled snugly within the hidden compartment of the Victorian manor. His final missive, a testament to his understanding, addressed to himself as testament, bore witness to the house's insidious grasp. "The house ensnares not the body, but the mind," Reeves inscribed. "Morgan's insight rings true, the doors guide you in circles, deceiving perception. Once enlightenment dawns, escape beckons, yet by then departure holds no allure." The case, shrouded in enigma, lingers as a specter of unresolved mysteries, designated as suspicious demises under ongoing scrutiny. The Victorian edifice stands condemned, its confines sealed off by vigilant custodians. Whispers persist of spectral illuminations flickering within its chambers on certain moonlit nights, of wanderers who venture inside but never emerge into the light of day. Some locals assert that the house claims those who delve too deeply into its secrets, a toll exacted by ancient forces. Others maintain that Morgan and Reeves unearthed a potent and ageless truth, a reality existing beyond the confines of conventional perception. The verity remains as elusive as an exit in a mansion where every door leads back to the beginning, a riddle enshrined in the annals of time. Story 16. The parcel arrived with no indication of its origins, no return label, no tracking number. Just a plain cardboard box, faintly damp from the morning dew. It wasn't intended for her. The address was accurate, yet the name was foreign. She could have easily disregarded it, left it sitting on her doorstep, but curiosity beckoned her. She succumbed. With hesitant fingers, she peeled away the tape, anticipating mundane contents like books or clothing. However, nestled inside lay a VHS tape, accompanied by a solitary sticky note that simply read, "Watch alone." Sarah Miller held the black plastic cassette in her hands, sensing an inexplicable weightiness as though it bore the burden of forbidden knowledge. Tracing the worn edges, she felt the imperfections etched into the plastic casing. The handwritten note bore the marks of urgency, every stroke imbued with a sense of pressure. Amidst the backdrop of her serene suburban neighborhood, a distant dog's bark, the laughter of children, the droning of a lawnmower, Sarah brought the mysterious package inside, placing it on her kitchen counter. Doubt began to creep into her mind. The name on the box, Daniel Whitaker, meant nothing to her. In her 4 years of residence, she had never encountered mail addressed to such a person. The previous occupants, the Johnsons, had bid farewell, leaving behind no trace of a Daniel Whitaker. Battle ensued within her, a clash between curiosity and unease. Her gaze flitted towards the VCR, a relic of nostalgia she held on to. There was something about the tape that beckoned to her, a riddle cloaked in aged black plastic. Against her instincts, Sarah inserted the tape into the machine. Initially, static flickered on the screen, gradually morphing into clarity. A dimly lit room materialized, illuminated by a solitary lamp. The camera's angle was askew, suggesting a hurried setup. A man occupied a wooden chair, his features shrouded by shadows. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," the man's voice was hushed yet resolute. "If you're watching this, someone has discovered you, and that means they'll soon find me as well." Leaning forward, he unveiled a countenance marked by exhaustion and vigilance, sunken eyes, stubble, disheveled hair. "I am innocent of her murder. I need you to understand that. They planted evidence against me, my fingerprints, my DNA, despite never having laid a hand on her." As he adjusted the camera, the Spartan surroundings of the room came into view: bare walls, minimal furnishings, a transient abode hinting at imminent departure. "They fabricated everything. The official narrative will claim I knew her, that we quarreled, that witnesses heard our disputes. None of it holds truth. My first encounter with Catherine Walsh was through the news." His voice wavered slightly. "She was found dead, murdered in her home, and yet my DNA inexplicably saturated the crime scene." In a different setting, Detective Eliza Ramirez scrutinized the identical VHS tape on her desk, the fifth to emerge. 5 tapes, 5 disparate recipients, all bearing the desperate plea of Daniel Whitaker, the prime suspect in Catherine Walsh's homicide. A man who had vanished into thin air following the discovery of her lifeless body. Initially, the Walsh case had appeared straightforward: a young professional woman strangled in her own bedroom. No signs of forced entry, indications of a struggle, and damning DNA evidence incriminating Whitaker, whose fingerprints were already on file from a minor infraction years prior. Eyewitnesses had spotted a man resembling him near her residence in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. Cell phone records placed him in the vicinity on the fateful night. However, the arrival of the tapes muddled the narrative. "The tapes complicate matters," Detective Ramirez intoned as she updated her case files. "Whitaker is either orchestrating an intricate diversion or exposing a darker truth." Her gaze swept across the evidence board, smiling photographs of Catherine Walsh, grisly crime scene images too ghastly to linger on, maps pinpointing the delivery locations of the packages, and at the center, the driver's license photo of Daniel Whitaker, his eyes imploring. A pivotal shift occurred in the investigation when Ramirez unearthed Catherine Walsh's involvement in a whistleblower case against her employer, Pharmacorp, a formidable pharmaceutical entity holding government contracts. Walsh had stumbled upon discrepancies in their clinical trial data, evidence of concealing severe side effects in a hastily marketed drug. She was preparing to testify. A former colleague disclosed to Ramirez in a hushed tone, glancing nervously towards the exit. Catherine possessed incriminating documents, evidence that executives were aware of the issues but chose to bury them. The trial was slated for the following week. Detective Ramirez began noticing peculiar discrepancies. The DNA evidence seemed too immaculate, discovered in locations incongruent with the crime. Witness statements regarding Whitaker seemed rehearsed, echoing verbatim across interviews. Most disconcertingly, Surveillance footage from neighboring establishments inexplicably malfunctioned during the crucial timeframe surrounding the murder. 3 days subsequent to the initial tape, Sarah Miller received a secondary package. This time it contained a trove of documents, clinical trial reports, internal correspondences, email transcripts, all originating from PharmaCorp, all bearing Catherine Walsh's digital signature. Each piece of evidence substantiated her claims. The trajectory of the investigation shifted as Detective Ramirez connected with other tape recipients, weaving together Whitaker's breadcrumb trail. He had been employed in IT security for a PharmaCorp contracted firm, never crossing paths with Catherine but stumbling upon her name flagged in an anomalous security protocol he wasn't authorized to access. They were monitoring her, Whitaker elucidated in a subsequent tape that surfaced. I intercepted surveillance orders within the system. They knew she was amassing evidence, and then I found myself locked out of the network. The next day she was dead, and inexplicably I became the scapegoat. A breakthrough emerged when Sarah Miller discerned a crucial detail in her copy of the tape that had eluded others. A reflection in a window behind Whitaker divulged a row of storage units. Collaborating with Detective Ramirez, they pinpointed the location. Within Unit 217, they uncovered a compendium of evidence, Whitaker's journal chronicling the conspiracy, Catherine's original files, and most damningly, meticulous blueprints for framing Whitaker, inscribed in the handwriting of PharmaCorp's security chief, a former law enforcement officer with access to evidence handling protocols. Justice prevailed not through a dramatic apprehension, but via the incremental accumulation of irrefutable proof. 3 executives faced indictment. The security head confessed, entering a plea deal to testify against his superiors. The drug was withdrawn from consideration for market release. Emerging from seclusion, a gaunt and altered Daniel Whitaker saw the charges against him dismissed, though the ordeal had indelibly marked him. Sarah Miller encountered him once as he retrieved his tape. They conversed briefly on her porch, the initial point of contact for his mysterious package. "Why me?" she inquired. "Why send it to my address?" His gaze bore the weight of fatigue. The selection was algorithmic. I required individuals devoid of ties to me or Catherine, individuals under minimal scrutiny, individuals who still retained faith in their discernment amidst the damning allegations. The erstwhile suspect and the inadvertent witness stood in contemplative silence, pondering the fragile boundary between justice and contrived falsehoods. Sarah eventually voiced the erroneous address turned out to be the precise one. The VHS tapes were cataloged as evidence, physical reminders that truth occasionally arrives in enigmatic packages under unfamiliar names, awaiting a curious soul to delve within. Story 17. The motel stood as a relic of the past, a place where transient souls sought brief respite. When she checked in, the clerk's eyes held a silent warning as he passed her the key. "Avoid the last door on the left," his voice barely a whisper. Intrigue tugged at her, urging her to explore. That night, under the muted glow of flickering lights, she stood before the ominous door. The metal handle sent shivers through her as she leaned closer, listening intently. A faint, eerie breath emanated from within, stirring a primal fear within her. Detective Morgan Reed entered the room, her senses assaulted by the acrid scent of blood that tainted the air. The crime scene told a haunting tale, a room of contradictions, of untouched elegance marred by unspeakable horror. A young woman lay lifeless on the floor, her expression frozen in eternal shock. Reed knelt beside her, absorbing the solemnity of the moment. This was the third victim, a pattern emerging in the shadows of forgotten motels. The forensic technician's voice pierced the silence, detailing the grim familiarity of the scene. Reed nodded, her mind already piecing together fragments of a gruesome puzzle. The victim's attire clashed with the seedy surroundings, a stark contrast that hinted at a deeper motive. Back at the precinct, Reed delved into the case, each piece of evidence a whisper in the night. The faces of three women stared back at her from photographs, a connection woven by tragedy. The press buzzed with speculation, painting a portrait of a lurking predator. As the days blurred into nights, the investigation intensified, revealing little in its wake. Surveillance footage yielded no answers, leaving Reed grasping at shadows. Elaine Werner's life remained a mystery, her death a chilling enigma. A breakthrough came in a whispered confession from Werner's sister, unraveling a web of deceit and betrayal. Reed followed the trail to Werner's workplace, where a shadowy figure loomed on the periphery. Charles Emerson, a man of influence, exuded a facade of innocence that masked a darker truth. Clues emerged, leading Reed down a winding path of deceit and obsession. Emerson's composed demeanor cracked under scrutiny, unveiling a chilling revelation of twisted desires. The trial unveiled a tale of manipulation and violence, a story etched in blood and broken trust. Emerson's hollow gaze met Reed's, a fleeting glimpse into a void devoid of remorse. The world dubbed it the door on the left case, a cautionary tale of unchecked desires and shattered lives. Yet for Reed, the echoes of that fateful night lingered, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks behind closed doors. In the evidence vault, three keys stood as silent witnesses to a tragedy untold, a solemn reminder that some secrets are never truly laid to rest. Story 18. In the beginning, the new inhabitants of the old Victorian-era house only saw peeling wallpaper. They planned no immediate renovations, drawn in by the home's historical charm and the elegant silver-streaked previous owner, Margaret Cavendish. But fate had other plans for Michael and Sarah Klein as they uncovered more than just layers of wallpaper. It all started innocently enough with a water stain in the master bedroom. A simple discoloration that led to a discovery that would unravel a chilling mystery hidden within the walls. As Sarah gently peeled back the damaged wallpaper, they unearthed a name written in ink Uninterrupted Winters. The name repeated in a frenzy, covering every inch of the wall in a desperate, erratic script. Puzzled by this mysterious revelation, Sarah whispered, "Who's Uninterrupted Winters?" The name echoed hauntingly in the room, stirring a sense of unease within them. Driven by curiosity, Michael delved into property records, only to find no trace of Uninterrupted Winters associated with the house. Their online search unearthed a decades-old missing persons case that bore a striking resemblance to Margaret Cavendish, the woman who sold them the house. A missing woman's face mirrored theirs in an old photograph, sparking a sense of foreboding in the air. Their curiosity soon transformed into an obsession as they unraveled the tangled web of lies and secrets surrounding the house and its previous owner. They discovered hidden identities, forged documents, and a chilling connection between Uninterrupted Winters and Margaret Cavendish. The boundaries between reality and illusion blurred as they unearthed a dark past buried deep within the walls of their new home. Forensic teams descended on the house, turning it into an active crime scene. The wallpaper became a canvas of truth and deception, revealing a twisted tale of obsession and betrayal. Beneath the floorboards, they found a trove of identities belonging to Uninterrupted Winters and Margaret Cavendish, each a piece of a fragmented puzzle waiting to be solved. But the most shocking revelation came with the discovery of DNA evidence linking Uninterrupted Winters to a psychiatric patient named Rebecca Eldridge, a woman with a fractured mind, consumed by a severe dissociative identity disorder. Rebecca had assumed Uninterrupted's identity, weaving a complex tapestry of personalities to mask her own fractured psyche. The walls bore witness to Rebecca's inner turmoil, a confession etched in ink, a cry for help lost in the shadows of her mind. As the investigation deepened, the truth emerged from the depths of deception. Ground-penetrating radar led to a grim discovery in the backyard, the long-lost remains of Alina Winters. Rebecca Eldridge, under the guise of Margaret Cavendish, was apprehended, her facade crumbling in the face of overwhelming evidence. The names on the wall became symbols of guilt and remembrance, a tribute to a life lost in the tangled web of a fractured mind. For Michael and Sarah, their dream home transformed into a haunting reminder of a tragedy long forgotten. The house where the walls whispered secrets of a bygone era, where truth and illusion intertwined in a chilling dance of darkness. And as the night fell, casting shadows upon the old Victorian house, the mystery of Alina Winters and Rebecca Eldridge lingered in the air, a tale of madness and obsession that whispered softly, lulling the world into a deep and dreamless sleep. Story 19: The Unseen Observer. The old wooden plank groaned beneath Sarah's weight, betraying its age with a subtle shift that caught her attention. Curiosity piqued. She knelt down to investigate, her fingers tracing the edges of the loose board. The floor beneath her feet was not as solid as it seemed. It held secrets in its hidden depths. With gentle precision, she pried up the boards, revealing a dark, narrow space lurking beneath the cozy confines of her newly acquired home. Dust motes danced in the dim light, cobwebs clinging to the corners. But as her eyes adjusted to the gloom, shapes began to emerge from the shadows: a mattress, a chair, and in the far corner, a weathered notebook filled with her name, written over and over again. Detective Morgan Reed observed silently as Sarah peered into the abyss beneath the house, a mixture of fear and disbelief reflected in her wide eyes. It was more than just a hidden room. It was a violation, an intrusion of something sinister into what should have been a fresh start for Sarah. "Leave everything as it is." Detective Reed's voice was calm yet commanding as she clicked on her flashlight, casting a beam of light that revealed walls adorned with surveillance photos of Sarah, images captured without her knowledge as she went about her daily life. A shrine of obsession hidden right beneath her very feet. Sarah had purchased the quaint cottage from the estate of Walter Green, an elderly man who had passed away with no known relatives. The property had sat empty for months, its history shrouded in silence. The details of the hidden chamber had not been disclosed during the sale, leaving Sarah to uncover the chilling truth on her own. "I never met him, the previous owner." Sarah's voice was a whisper filled with unease. "I thought that basement access was sealed off. The inspection report said as much." As crime scene investigators arrived, the echo of their equipment against the wooden floors marked the beginning of a meticulous search for clues. Fingerprints, photographs, and evidence were cataloged and analyzed, revealing a timeline of obsession that spanned years. Walter Green had been watching Sarah long before she had ever set foot in the cottage. The department psychologist offered insights into Walter's escalating fixation, his descent from fantasy into dangerous obsession. The hidden room was a manifestation of his twisted desires, a preparation for a future that never came to pass. Detective Reed's investigation took a chilling turn when a former coworker of Walter's revealed cryptic details of his fixation on Sarah. A key found in Walter's locker led them to a storage unit, a replica of Sarah's old life, meticulously recreated by a man consumed by delusion. Walter's troubled past came to light, his history of erotomania painting a portrait of a man haunted by warped perceptions of love and connection. Sarah's mere existence had reignited his dormant obsessions, leading him down a dark path that culminated in a macabre plan for their togetherness. The truth unfolded in stark clarity, a tale of a victim unknowingly stalked by a spectral presence lurking just beneath the floorboards of her home. Sarah's decision to sell the house was a bittersweet relief, a step towards reclaiming her sense of security in a world tainted by shadows. As life moved on, the house found new occupants, unaware of the chilling history hidden within its walls. The hidden chamber was sealed, the floorboards replaced, but the memory of what lay beneath lingered, a reminder of the unseen dangers that lurk in the quiet spaces, of the fragile line between safety and peril, between reality and the dark recesses of the mind. Story 20. In the heart of the town, the old library faced its last days, standing silent and forgotten. The demolition crew worked tirelessly, their hammers and saws echoing through the dusty halls, but fate had other plans that day. As a worker moved a bookshelf, a hidden latch revealed itself, whispering secrets of the past. With a soft click, the bookshelf swung open, unveiling a passage to a forgotten room. The air hung heavy, untouched by time, holding memories long lost. No furniture adorned the room except for a solitary chair bolted to the floor, a silent witness to the mysteries within. On the wall, a haunting message repeated itself in scratched letters: "I am still here." A shiver passed through the crew as they glimpsed the eerie sight. The foreman wasted no time, calling for the authorities, sensing a darkness lurking beneath the surface. Detective Morgan Walsh arrived, his experience etched in the lines of his face. The beam of his flashlight pierced the shadows, revealing the chilling words that adorned the walls. "Secure the scene," his voice commanded, cutting through the stillness. The officers followed his orders, knowing they stood on the threshold of something beyond their understanding. The history of the library whispered tales of the Harrington family, once pillars of the community. Their daughter Rebecca had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and sorrow. The room held secrets that begged to be uncovered, a story waiting to be told. Forensic experts delved into the hidden room, unraveling its dark past. Traces of hair and fibers clung to the chair, telling a tale of struggle and captivity. The walls bore the marks of a silent plea, a message from a lost soul. As Detective Walsh dug deeper, a sinister pattern emerged. The timing of the library's donation, the hidden room, and the contractor's ties to the family all pointed to a chilling truth. Rebecca's fate had been sealed within these walls, a prisoner of her own blood. The revelation sent shockwaves through the town. The family's dark secrets came to light, exposing a web of lies and deceit. Maxwell Harrington, the family patriarch, faced the consequences of his actions, his guilt written in the journal found hidden in his study. In a coastal town far from the shadows of the library, Maxwell's facade crumbled under the weight of his sins. The truth spilled from his lips, a confession stained with regret. Rebecca's fate had been sealed by family ties, a betrayal that echoed through the years. The excavation unearthed the remains of a life lost too soon, a silver bracelet glinting in the pale light. Maxwell's sentencing brought closure, but the scars remained, etched in the hearts of those who had loved Rebecca. The library stood as a monument to a tragedy long buried, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past. Flowers adorned its entrance, a tribute to a life cut short and a justice long overdue. Rebecca's message, etched in desperation, had finally been heard, ensuring her memory would endure, a beacon of hope in the darkness. And as the town drifted into slumber, the secrets of the old library whispered in the night, a lullaby of closure and peace. Story 21. The cafe had become his sanctuary over the years, a haven of familiarity where he could lose himself in the rituals of solitude. Each day, he would occupy the same table, order the same black coffee, and immerse himself in the tranquility of his own thoughts. The barista recognized his face, but his true essence remained a mystery to those around him. Then, one fateful day, his presence was notably absent. When law enforcement delved into his usual spot, a wallet was the only trace he left behind. Within its confines lay a driver's license bearing a face without a name, an identity lost in the void. The security footage, upon scrutiny, revealed a perplexing truth. The man known only as John Doe had entered, had seated himself, but had never departed. Detective Sarah Mercer delved into the enigma, her fingers tracing the cold metal table as she pored over the footage once more. John Doe, captured by the cameras, appeared unassuming, a figure blending seamlessly into the tapestry of the cafe. His vanishing act defied all logic, leaving behind a trail of bewilderment in his wake. "Play it again," Mercer requested of the tech specialist. The footage replayed the mundane sequence of events: John's arrival, his customary order, his retreat to a secluded corner with his notebook. And then, the pivotal moment arrived, the moment when he dissolved into the shadows, never to return. "Examine the restroom footage," Mercer urged. "It's baffling," the specialist confessed. "No sign of him entering any restroom. It's as if he slipped through the fabric of reality itself." Back at the precinct, Mercer sifted through the enigmatic contents of the wallet. Blank spaces replaced vital information, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. The credit cards led to nowhere, the cash meticulously arranged, and a lone business card with a cryptic phone number. A call to that number yielded only silence, punctuated by the rustle of unseen pages. The barista, a witness to John Doe's silent presence, could offer little insight. He kept to himself, always engrossed in his writing, polite but distant, a man shrouded in enigma. As Mercer delved deeper, the notebook revealed a cryptic language, a code that defied deciphering. Architectural sketches hinted at structures unknown to the world outside. John Doe's existence appeared confined to the realm of the cafe, a ghostly specter haunting its familiar confines. A peculiar anomaly in the security footage caught Mercer's attention, a flicker in time as John entered the cafe each morning. Dismissed as a glitch, the detective sensed a deeper significance. Returning to the scene of the enigma, she positioned herself at his table, eyes tracing the path he had taken. An antique mirror adorned with cryptic symbols akin to those in John's notebook loomed between the entrance and the hallway. The shop owner, questioned about the mirror, revealed its long-standing presence, untouched by time. Mercer's hand met the mirror's surface, expecting cool glass but encountering an inexplicable warmth instead. Forensic examination unveiled a hidden compartment behind the mirror, a trove of identical wallets and a journal chronicling decades of mystery. The final entry spoke of an impending closure, a warning of encroaching shadows. Fingerprints, carbon-dated wallets, and journal entries wove a tapestry of intrigue, an experiment in temporal manipulation, a dance with parallel realities. The cafe stood as a nexus, the mirror as a gateway to the unknown. Reports of spectral reflections and phantom sightings swirled around the coffee shop, a testament to the blurred boundaries of existence. An elderly physicist shed light on John Doe's true identity, Daniel Weston, a brilliant mind lost to the annals of time. Mercer's investigation led her to the heart of a forgotten laboratory, now buried beneath the cafe's foundations. The truth of Weston's experiments unraveled before her, a tapestry of shattered realities and intersecting dimensions. In the final moments of the case, Mercer glimpsed the impossible two versions of Weston, mirrored in time and space. The shattered mirror bore a cryptic farewell, a warning etched in the language of the unknown. The tale of the man who defied existence remained a haunting enigma, a riddle lost to the sands of time. The cafe's doors closed, the building crumbled, and Daniel Weston slipped into the realm of myth. Mercer's pen danced across the pages, mirroring the legacy of a man lost to the currents of time. And in the stillness of the night, the fragment of an antique mirror whispered of forgotten truths, its surface rippling with echoes of a reality beyond our own. Story 22. The aged apartment exuded a sense of history with its creaking heating system and rattling pipes, a familiar soundtrack to its inhabitants. But one resident, she, began to question the norm when a faint yet distinct voice floated through the vents, not the usual background noise of neighbors on phone calls, but a whisper calling out her name. With a racing heart, she leaned in closer, feeling a chill brush past her cheek before the voice softly, almost teasingly, declared, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood silently in the heart of the empty apartment, her focus fixed on the rusty vent cover forcibly removed from the wall. The forensic team meticulously worked around her, cameras capturing every detail of the scene. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had vanished without a trace for a week until a peculiar odor alerted the building manager. What they uncovered within the ventilation system was beyond comprehension. She claimed to hear voices through the vents, Officer Patel recited from his notes. Management dismissed her complaints, attributing them to the building's aging infrastructure. Shaw knelt by the vent, observing the deep scratch marks around its edges. "These marks weren't made by tools," she whispered. The frantic gouges in the metal seemed like desperate attempts by fingernails from the inside trying to pry the cover open. Alina was a beloved kindergarten teacher, known for her warm smile and thriving houseplants. Her absence prompted concern among her students who crafted cards for her. Her sister, the one who reported her missing, revealed during an interview that Alina had grown paranoid, convinced that someone was watching and speaking to her through the vents. Shaw scanned the apartment with fresh eyes, noting the pristine bed, the neglected coffee mug, and a chair placed directly beneath the vent, as if someone had been perched there, listening intently. Further investigation unveiled unsettling findings. Fibers found in the vent matched those from Alina's favorite cardigan. A foreign fingerprint was discovered inside the vent cover, and chilling audio recordings from Alina's phone revealed eerie exchanges where she sought validation of a presence beyond. The history of the building added a sinister layer to the mystery. Previous tenants had vacated abruptly, citing noises in the walls and even hallucinations of voices emanating from the vents. The building superintendent, Harold Weber, exhibited a calm facade during questioning, except when pressed about the former residents of apartment 4B, his demeanor subtly shifting, hinting at concealed knowledge. The case took a dark turn when a hidden access panel was found in Alina's bathroom, leading to a maintenance passage within the walls, granting access to the building's ventilation system. Within this secret crawl space lay evidence of someone living within the walls, surveilling and whispering. A search of Weber's apartment unveiled a meticulously organized collection of audio recordings and voyeuristic images of Alina, alongside a digital diary detailing his disturbing fixation on her. The most damning evidence surfaced in a storage unit filled with mementos from past tenants, preserved as twisted trophies of his perverse connections. Weber's arrest was met with eerie compliance, his chilling proclamation to Shaw hinting at a deeper connection to the building, a malevolent force channeling through him. The tragic fate of Alina revealed a harrowing journey through the ventilation system, manipulated and coerced by sedatives into a labyrinth of whispers promising sanctuary. As families of former tenants shared their experiences, a chilling pattern emerged of a predator lurking within the walls, orchestrating a symphony of fear and manipulation through the vents. At trial, Weber's unsettling calmness clashed with evidence of his meticulous planning, leading to a swift, guilty verdict. Despite his incarceration, the apartment building remained tainted by his presence, whispers still echoing through the vents, a reminder of the haunting legacy he left behind. Residents came and went, unsettled by mysterious sounds and phantom whispers, the building's eerie echoes painting a portrait of lingering dread. Story 23. In the old apartment, strange sounds echoed through the walls, the groans of pipes, the creaks of floorboards. But the new tenant felt a chill down her spine, for the footsteps she heard were not mere creaks. They were deliberate, methodical, coming from above, even though she resided on the top floor. One night she summoned her courage and tapped the ceiling with a broomstick. The footsteps ceased abruptly. Silence enveloped the room, heavy and thick. Then a single knock reverberated down from within the ceiling. Sarah Coleman chose to keep the knocking incident to herself, attributing it to the settling of the building or perhaps a stray animal in the attic. As the footsteps persisted night after night, she adapted, drowning out the eerie footfalls with blaring TV volumes, wearing headphones to bed, anything to escape the haunting sounds that traversed her ceiling in the darkness. Detective Morris's attention was piqued by the apartment when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a hidden crawlspace while conducting repairs. Removing a section of drywall to fix a leak outside Sarah's unit, the worker uncovered a narrow passage unaccounted for in the building plans. Illuminated by a flashlight, the passage revealed a makeshift living space with remnants of life: a blanket, food wrappers, water bottles, and a worn notebook. Alarmed, the building superintendent contacted the authorities. Detective Morris and his partner, Detective Rivera, found the maintenance worker in a state of shock, murmuring about someone living within the walls, watching. The notebook contained intricate details of Sarah Coleman's life, her routines, her visitors, her meals, her viewing habits, even her moments of solitude. The handwriting, once neat, descended into chaos with strange symbols dancing along the margins. The final entry read, "The subject ignores my signals now. She defies me. No one defies me." Forensic teams scoured the crawl space, uncovering fingerprints that matched no database records. They stumbled upon an intricate network of hidden passages woven into the building's structure, some dating back decades. These passages led to 5 different apartments, but terminated in observation points disguised as innocuous fixtures, with Sarah Coleman's unit as the focal point. Interviews with current residents yielded nothing out of the ordinary, but former tenants shared unsettling experiences. 3 past occupants of Sarah's apartment spoke of feeling watched or hearing inexplicable noises, leading one to flee after a mere fortnight. None had spoken up, fearing ridicule. The breakthrough in the case came with the discovery of microscopic blood spatter in one of the hidden passages. DNA testing linked it to Martin Weaver, a former resident who had vanished mysteriously 4 years prior, residing directly below Sarah's unit. Martin had complained about noises from above, confronting a reclusive tenant named Edward, who departed soon after Martin's disappearance. Investigations into Edward's past unveiled a pattern of transient living, always on the top floor, maintaining minimal social ties before vanishing without a trace. A neighbor from his previous residence described him as intense, fixated on silence. Property records led investigators to a remote cabin, a sinister shrine to his victims. Maps, journals, and photographs adorn the walls, each detailing his obsession with unsuspecting tenants. Behind the cabin, cadaver dogs uncovered graves, one after another, holding the remains of Edward's victims. As forensic experts worked to identify the deceased, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's building. Though the crawl spaces had been sealed, reports of strange noises persisted. During security system installations, a notebook newer than the first emerged from a hidden corner, a chilling message inscribed within. "They found my old nest, but not my new one." The notebook mirrored the previous one, its final page depicting Sarah's apartment layout with a marked red passage and a date for that very night. Officers rushed to evacuate Sarah, only to find her residence deserted, the shower running, the TV on. A cryptic message etched on the bathroom mirror beckoned her to look up. The hunt for Edward, now known as Edward Mercer, a former construction worker adept at clandestine renovations, remains ongoing. Thermal scans revealed no signs of occupancy within the walls of Sarah's building, leaving her fate a haunting mystery. Linked to disappearances across state lines, Sarah's case serves as a cautionary tale for apartment managers about covert modifications and hidden spaces. The image that lingers in Detective Morris's mind is not the graves or the journals, but Sarah, trapped in a nightmare of unseen footsteps above her. The footsteps that ceased when she knocked, only to echo back. In the stillness of his own home, Detective Morris gazes at his ceiling, listening intently, pondering who else might be listening in the shadows of the night. Story 24. She yearned to redo the nursery before the little one arrived. The walls wore a faded blue, a hue steeped in tales of times gone by. As she brushed on the initial coat of white, a hidden secret emerged from beneath the faint outline of letters, gradually sharpening into focus. A message etched beneath the surface. "Don't let it hear you," her breath hitched. Stepping back, her gaze fell upon them tiny handprints in the fresh paint, perched too high for a child's reach. This revelation within the nursery of the Morgan house marked the genesis of what later came to be known as the Whispering House Mystery. The young couple had acquired the Victorian-style abode mere months before, lured by an unbelievably low price. The real estate agent had only alluded to minor cosmetic issues, omitting any mention of the property's shadowed past. Detective Sarah Klein rang the doorbell, clutching her notebook. A woman, her pregnant belly commanding attention beneath splattered overalls, answered. Weariness clouded her eyes, sleep a distant memory. The detective observed the tremor in her hands as she recounted the discovery of the message and handprints. The previous owners vanished overnight, the woman divulged. Neighbors claimed they left without warning, with only essentials packed into their car, no moving truck in sight. The detective treaded through the historic estate, every footfall whispering against weathered floorboards. Stationed in the nursery, she scrutinized the half-painted wall. The message lingered, a stark contrast against the abandoned paint job. Adjacent, 5 miniature handprints imprinted in the wet paint, reaching the height of an adult's shoulder. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into the property's records. The house had changed hands 8 times in 3 decades, a turnover rate uncommonly high. Each family resided there for less than 2 years. More unsettling were the child welfare reports linked to 3 of those families. Children speaking of whispers from the walls and a sense of being watched as they slumbered. Delving deeper, the detective unearthed construction blueprints and historical accounts. The house had once belonged to Alina Blackwood, a wealthy widow who, childless, ran a small orphanage on the premises during the early industrial era. Newspaper clippings referenced 5 children who had mysteriously vanished from her care. Authorities at the time presumed they had absconded, a common occurrence among orphans in those days. Upon Aliner's passing, renovators discovered a sealed room hidden behind the nursery wall. Inside lay remnants of children's tiny shoes, toys, and garments, but no bodies. The case grew cold, relegated to dusty archives. Detective Klein interviewed former residents, weaving together a chilling narrative. Each family with children recounted inexplicable events, toys rearranged overnight, childish laughter resonating in empty corridors, and crayon drawings materializing on walls. Most dismissed these incidents as fanciful until the writing surfaced. The message varied slightly in different accounts. Don't let them find you. Don't utter a word. Don't let it hear you. The script, consistent in handwriting, always revealed during nursery repaintings. A forensic linguist compared snapshots of the writing to Aliner Blackwood's journals, finding a match. More alarming were the handprints uniform in size and placement across generations, despite different children inhabiting the house. The investigation took a grim twist when the detective persuaded the current owners to permit ground-penetrating radar in the basement. The technician identified anomalies in the readings, 5 distinct shapes under the concrete floor, each resembling a child's form. Breaking through the concrete, a grim confirmation surfaced. 5 small sets of remains, arranged in a circle. Forensic analysis indicated the children met their demise during Aliner's tenure in the house. Each child bore a pendant engraved with their name, the 5 orphans believed to have fled. Luminol sprayed throughout the nursery unveiled a haunting sight. In the darkness, handprints glowed on every wall, concealed beneath layers of paint, invisible to the naked eye. Countless prints at varying heights, as though the children had strived to escape. Aliner's journals, salvaged from county archives, exposed her macabre rationale. She held the belief that orphaned children harbored unique spiritual energy. By confining them in the hidden chamber, she sought to tap into their vitality to extend her own life. The children had etched their warnings into the wall, using nails and bits of metal, hoping future inhabitants would uncover their plight. The case concluded with the proper burial of the 5 victims. Their names were finally recorded not as runaways, but as victims of foul play. The house stood vacant thereafter, the expectant couple refusing to return even for their possessions. Detective Klein submitted her final report, featuring photographs of the luminol illuminated handprints and the message beneath the paint. She noted that while justice had been meted out for the original victims, an inexplicable presence lingered within that house, something that transcended layers of paint and time. The nursery walls were raised during remediation, yet workers attested to hearing children's whispers amid the rubble. None dared to return after their shifts. The house eventually faced condemnation, another unsolved case relegated to a musty filing cabinet, a tangible closure, yet spiritual enigmas left unanswered. The detective retained a photograph from the investigation, 5 luminol handprints glowing in the shadows, an eerie reminder that certain crimes leave indelible marks no fresh coat of paint can conceal. Story 25. It arrived in the post, nestled in a simple envelope with no sender's details. A solitary brass key, weathered by time's touch. The homeowner couldn't place it, but a whisper of recognition brushed against her senses. Testing it in every lock she owned yielded no results. The key didn't belong to her. Yet when she set it down on the coffee table, the ancient grandfather clock in the hallway emitted a solitary, echoing chime despite its years of silence. Sarah Miller, upon discovering the enigmatic key, reported the peculiar incident to the authorities. What began as an oddity swiftly unraveled into a chilling criminal inquiry that would shake the serene suburban neighborhood to its core. The initial responding officer brushed off her concerns, attributing the key's arrival to a possible mistake. However, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, placing it in a small evidence bag that would later prove pivotal in a sprawling investigation. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator in the Special Victims Unit, received the case file during the morning briefing. With a keen intuition for cases that transcended their benign beginnings, he found the brass key sitting on his desk, unassuming yet disquieting. Background checks on Sarah unveiled no criminal record. A retired high school English teacher, widowed with grown children living miles away. No red flags in her financial transactions, phone records, or online presence. She seemed to be precisely who she claimed, an unwitting recipient of something inexplicable. Forensic analysis revealed only Sarah's fingerprints on the key. The envelope yielded nothing significant except a generic postmark from a regional distribution center. No DNA traces, no tangible evidence. The key itself, a standard Schlage worn with age, possibly several years old. The breakthrough emerged unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to cross-reference the key's distinct bidding pattern in the department database. A cold case from 7 years prior bore an identical key pattern connected to a storage unit where investigators had stumbled upon blood-stained carpet, tools for cutting, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had hit a dead end due to insufficient evidence to unmask a suspect. Diving into the dusty case files, Harmon discovered that the detective who had previously worked on the case had retired. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid in cash. Surveillance footage had long been erased. The evidence collected had provided partial DNA profiles, but no matches in any criminal database. The photos retrieved from the storage unit depicted 5 women, all seemingly unconscious. Only 3 had been identified during the initial investigation, reported missing, but never located. Their cases lingered open, tagged as suspected homicides with no bodies found. When Sarah viewed the photos, she couldn't recognize any of the women. As the investigation progressed, she grew increasingly uneasy, fortifying her home with new locks and a security system. The nagging question persisted: why had someone chosen to send her this key? Harmon commissioned a fresh analysis of the original evidence utilizing modern techniques. The partial DNA sample was expanded, run through genealogical databases, leading to a distant familial match, a second cousin twice removed from the suspect. Tracing lineage backward, investigators zeroed in on Harold Jenkins, who had resided 2 streets away from Sarah until relocating about 6 years ago. His current whereabouts remained a mystery. Further scrutiny unearthed that Jenkins had been a substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah taught, though their interactions had been minimal. His work records displayed sporadic employment history, prolonged unexplained gaps, and frequent moves. A search of his former residence revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Neighbors described him as unobtrusive, nondescript, someone who preferred solitude, a familiar narrative preceding revelations about predators concealed in plain sight. The pivotal question lingered: why dispatch the key now? Why to Sarah Miller? Harmon speculated it could be a memento, a threat, or perhaps a grim invitation. The pursuit of Jenkins intensified. His driver's license had lapsed, no credit activity, no tax filings. The digital traces individuals typically leave behind were conspicuously absent, hinting at a deliberate effort to remain untraceable. The true horror of the case unfurled when authorities probed a small cabin registered to Jenkins' deceased mother. Under the time-worn wooden floorboards, investigators stumbled upon a concealed chamber accessible only through a trapdoor. Inside, meticulously organized shelves cradled numerous identical brass keys, each tagged with a name and date. 5 keys corresponded to the women in the photographs. The remaining keys, 27 in total, suggested a harrowing implication of additional victims previously unknown to law enforcement. Buried behind the cabin, forensic teams unearthed human remains. The excavation stretched on for weeks as multiple bodies in various stages of decay were discovered. Sarah was placed under constant protection as the nationwide manhunt for Jenkins intensified. Behavioral analysts posited that the key symbolized a twisted invitation, Jenkins singling out Sarah as an admirer of his craft. The media christened him the Keymaster, a moniker that raced through national headlines. Fear gripped the community as residents grappled with the realization of such horror lurking undetected among them. Tracking dogs followed a scent from the cabin into the wilderness. Search parties scoured dense forested areas. Thermal drones canvassed terrains too perilous for ground teams. The manhunt burgeoned into one of regional history's most extensive endeavors. In a remote woodland, a wildlife photographer snapped a picture of an individual resembling Jenkins. The blurry image captured a bearded man with vacant eyes shouldering a backpack, venturing deeper into the wilds. Authorities closed in, establishing a perimeter. Tactical squads navigated rugged landscapes as profilers anticipated that Jenkins would not surrender, potentially having prepared hidden caches and escape routes. The final showdown unfolded when a patrolling officer encountered Jenkins trying to cross a river. Refusing to surrender, Jenkins retreated to higher ground, barricading himself in an abandoned fire observation tower. Negotiation attempts yielded no response. When tactical units breached the tower, they discovered Jenkins lifeless from a self-inflicted wound. Beside him lay a journal chronicling his crimes in detail, alongside a brass key indistinguishable from the one Sarah had received. Within a waterproof container, investigators unearthed additional evidence: photographs, burial site coordinates, and personal effects seized from victims, a meticulously preserved account of atrocities spanning nearly a decade. The journal's closing entry addressed Sarah directly. "You never acknowledged me, but I observed every aspect of you. The key doesn't unlock any physical door because what I intended to give you transcends metal. It requires recognition. Now all will remember my name." Subsequent inquiries identified 32 victims in total. Families who had agonized over missing loved ones for years finally received closure, though it came laden with the unbearable weight of confirmed tragedy. Sarah refrained from returning to her residence, unable to reconcile the nightmare that had brushed so close to her mundane existence. Examination of the grandfather clock revealed a discreet wireless receiver Jenkins had been watching, waiting for the instant she received his present. The case endures as one of the most unsettling illustrations of predatory behavior concealed behind an ordinary fa-death. Psychological researchers delve into Jenkins' writings, seeking cues to identify similar malefactors before they strike. And somewhere within an evidence vault, a collection of brass keys sits in silent testimony to lives cut short, each key unlocking nothing yet unveiling a chilling truth about the shadows that sometimes lurk behind unassuming fronts. Story 26. The apartment had sat in silence for months, its secrets hidden within its walls. When the new tenants arrived, their expectations were low, perhaps a layer of dust, a few abandoned remnants left behind. Yet one door stood stubbornly closed, a closet with a mystery locked inside. The landlord, with a sense of foreboding, forced the door open, revealing a chilling sight. Inside, the walls bore witness to a struggle unseen. Deep gouges marred the wood, a silent testimony to desperate attempts to escape. In one corner lay an ancient flip phone, its screen illuminated by a single haunting message. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned in the ways of darkness, felt a shiver run down her spine at the sight. It wasn't the blood or violence that unsettled her, but the unspoken story of confinement and fear that the scratch marks told. "We need forensics now," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently photographed the eerie markings, "and bring me the records of the previous tenants." The message on the phone was stark in its simplicity. "I know what you did." The landlord, a man perpetually on edge, revealed that the previous tenant had vanished suddenly, leaving behind unpaid rent. "A quiet young woman," he muttered, avoiding the closet's gaze. "No trouble, just disappeared one day." Forensics unveiled a macabre truth. Within those scratch marks, traces of blood, mostly belonging to one person, Emma Caldwell, a missing woman of 28 years. But there were two other DNA samples, one unidentified and the other belonging to a man presumed dead for 2 years. Shaw was confounded by the revelation. Emma's apartment whispered of a life interrupted, unopened mail, a forgotten coffee mug, a bed meticulously made. Her phone records hinted at a sudden silence in her life, punctuated by calls from an unknown number. A new boyfriend, Reed informed, mysterious and intense, according to her sister. Surveillance footage painted a grim picture. Emma followed by a shadowy figure wearing a baseball cap, slipping into her building under the cloak of night. The puzzle pieces began to align when fingerprints matching the supposedly deceased Derek Mercer were discovered on the closet's doorknob. "He faked his death," Shaw concluded, her mind racing to unravel the tangled web connecting Emma, Derek, and another missing woman, Lynette Porter. A car linked to Derek, sightings near Emma's apartment, and Lynette's haunting words painted a sinister picture of control and captivity. Exploring a desolate property tied to Mercer's family, they uncovered Lynette, malnourished and traumatized, a living ghost of captivity. Journals, photographs, and videos revealed Mercer's twisted obsession with dominance and suffering, his victims pawns in his malevolent game. The hunt for Mercer spanned jurisdictions, a man driven not by mere murder but by the perverse pleasure of inflicting torment. Captured at a bus terminal, Mercer carried remnants of his dark deeds in his bag, a harbinger of the evil lurking within him. During interrogation, Mercer's calm demeanor belied the darkness within. He wove a tale of twisted justification, denying Emma her plea for rescue, reveling in his own distorted reality. The trial laid bare his intricate deception, his meticulous plan to erase Emma from existence. As the gavel fell, condemning Mercer to a life behind bars, a faint smile played on his lips, a glimpse into a mind beyond redemption. Lynette's brave words echoed in the courtroom, a testament to resilience in the face of unspeakable horrors. The case left a lasting impact on missing persons investigations, reshaping protocols to uncover hidden horrors lurking in plain sight. Detective Shaw, haunted by the memory of Emma's struggle, kept a piece of that closet door, a silent reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the most mundane of places. Story 27, the costume store was on the verge of closing down, clearing out its old stock. Amidst the assortment of forgotten items, a woman came across a mask tucked away on a dusty shelf. Its delicate features held an uncanny lifelike quality enough to give anyone a shiver. Placing it on the counter, she noticed the cashier's hesitation. "That's not ours," he muttered cryptically. Perplexed, she checked for a tag, only to find none. Without much thought, she decided to take it home with her. That same night she was roused from sleep by a subtle sound, a whisper of fabric shifting. The mask she had left on the dresser was no longer there. Instead, it sat ominously on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her. This woman, known as Catherine Reed, was later discovered by her neighbor. The front door creaked ajar, allowing the morning light to spill into the dim interior. What awaited inside was a scene that would linger in the minds of investigators for years to come. Catherine lay motionless on her bedroom floor, the mysterious mask nowhere to be seen. Detective Morgan arrived on the scene as forensics meticulously documented every detail. The click of shutters provided a rhythmic backdrop to the hushed voices that filled the room. No signs of forced entry, noted one officer, jotting down observations. The detective, her gaze sharp and perceptive, took in the room, noticing subtle nuances that others might overlook. A partially opened drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass on the nightstand. Everything seemed ordinary except for the life extinguished before its time. The medical examiner, with a solemn expression, could not determine the cause of death upon initial inspection. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle yet, a look of terror etched on Catherine's frozen features. As the detective knelt beside the lifeless form, a whisper escaped her lips. Something frightened her to her very core. Catherine had led a quiet existence as an art appraiser, known for her keen eye for authenticity. Colleagues spoke of her meticulous nature, her ability to detect even the slightest hint of a forgery. She had a talent for noticing what others missed, remarked her boss during questioning. The detective pondered whether this very talent had unwittingly led to her demise. Reviewing security footage from the costume shop, a peculiar discovery emerged. The cashier's genuine confusion over the mask raised suspicions. Upon consulting the shop owner, it became clear that the mask was a complete anomaly. "We never stocked anything like it," he affirmed. Though the audio was unclear, lip-reading experts later confirmed his denial of ever carrying such an item. The detective's visit to the now-defunct shop revealed a nervous owner who divulged unsettling details. The mask had surfaced during a clearance sale, its origin a mystery. "It was never part of our inventory," he confessed, hinting at strange occurrences following acquisitions from an estate sale linked to a collector's enigmatic death. A breakthrough in the investigation came when forensics uncovered microscopic fibers embedded in Catherine's fingertips. She was grasping at something, the lab technician explained, pointing to the peculiar fibers, a blend of human hair and an unidentified organic substance defying database matching. Delving further into the case, records unveiled a pattern of similar deaths stretching back decades. Each victim had acquired a peculiar mask before meeting their untimely end, each wearing an expression of pure terror. Yet, the circumstances surrounding each demise remained shrouded in mystery. A retired detective, seasoned by a past case, shared a revelation. Inside each mask, hidden behind the lining, were ancient symbols hinting at a ritual involving soul transference. A sense of foreboding settled as he slid a yellowed file across the table, recounting the eerie parallels in unsolved cases. A pivotal moment arrived with the unearthing of a journal concealed within Catherine's apartment. In her final entry, she recounted a growing unease and unsettling sensation of being watched, of a looming presence within her home. Her research into the mask's origins unveiled a sinister connection to a series of inexplicable deaths. Frantically, she inscribed the chilling truth: "The mask moves, watching me as I slumber." Symbols within match those of prior victims. Each mask claims a life before seeking a new host. The entity awaits, ready to transfer once more. As evidence mounted strange fibers, Catherine's revelations, The grim pattern of deaths, the medical examiner reached a chilling conclusion. Cardiac arrest induced by sheer terror. What could evoke such paralyzing fear, halting a heart in its tracks? The investigation took a disturbing turn with overlooked surveillance footage from a neighboring house. A figure emerged from Catherine's residence, cloaked in a mask resembling her features but moving with an unnatural, mechanical cadence. The detective issued alerts for the missing mask, yet it remained elusive until reports surfaced of its reappearance in a distant vintage shop already sold, the buyer's identity a mystery. The case, officially unresolved, lingers in the detective's mind. Catherine's journal rests in her desk drawer, a testament to a truth too bizarre for official records. Sometimes in the dead of night, she startles awake, sensing an unseen presence. Hastily checking windows and doors, she suppresses thoughts of the mask, destined to seek out another who sees its true nature an insatiable vessel, passing from victim to victim in a cyclical dance spanning centuries. The mask awaits its next encounter, its hollow gaze fixed upon a new soul, hungering for the essence behind mortal eyes.